I am in university right now, but staying with my parents at their house for the summer. I was hanging out with one of my friends and we decided to go to a party. I met this guy around my age when we were talking and having fun, but it was nothing too serious or anything, or so I thought. We exchanged phone numbers, we hung out a couple of times, but he became incredibly clingy right from the start, so I decided to distance myself in the hope that he would get the hint and back off. Well, he didn't. When I stopped responding, he sent me over 100 messages, with each message becoming increasingly more aggressive as time went on. Keep in mind that it had been less than 2 weeks since we first met. I finally responded and told him that he needed to chill out. He appeared to calm down a bit after I responded, but he then asked for a phone call. I agreed and we talked for a while. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, etc. Just a bunch of stuff that is way too intense to say to someone that you barely know. I tried to let him down gently, reminding him that I was only home for the summer and wasn't looking for anything serious beyond a fling. But this only seemed to make him angrier. He started yelling at me, insulting me, calling me all sorts of names, basically a complete 180 from what he had been saying mere minutes ago. Then, all of a sudden, the phone went silent. After a pause, he said in a quiet voice, "You had better get ready because I'm coming over for you." And then he hung up the phone. This was obviously very frightening because he knew that my parents were out of town for the week and that I was staying at their house alone. However, he didn't know where my parents' house was because I was always the one driving, and he didn't know my friend either, so I thought that he had no way of figuring it out, since, again, I'm normally living at school in another state. Regardless, I locked all the doors and shut the blinds just in case. After a while, though, maybe an hour or so, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I looked at my phone and I saw a notification on my lock screen. It was from the Ring app, indicating that there had been movement on my parents' camera, and it was him. If you watch the video, you can clearly see something in his hand as well. When he notices the camera, however, he left. I immediately blocked him on everything and I reported the incident. I have no idea what he planned to do once he got here. It was terrifying, though, to realize that he had come over when I was asleep and defenseless and completely unaware of his presence. As I would later find out, he was able to get my address from my phone number. Apparently, he Googled it and it returned my dad's name as the owner of the phone number, along with my parents' address. Since I'm on my parents' phone plan, I guess it shows up that I still live here. This revelation was horrifying as I never knew that my phone number could reveal my home address like that. I'm still extremely upset that this kind of private information is on the internet for pretty much anyone to find, as it's incredibly dangerous that websites will just give this away to anyone. So please, learn from my mistakes and do not give anyone your phone number unless you trust them. I found out that you can get a free Google Voice number to text and call people, and that number cannot be traced back to you so easily. My advice is to use a disposable number for anyone you're talking to that you meet informally or online. I really still can't sleep very well at night, and hopefully this never happens to anyone else. It was September in central Idaho. Autumn had come to the mountains, and with it bow hunters looking for mountain goats. My cousin Vern is an avid hunter. He's been all over North America hunting various game. Bears in Alaska, wild dogs in Texas, bighorn sheep in Wyoming. But his favorite hunting area was the Lemhi mountain range in central Idaho. Our extended family has been hunting in those mountains for generations. We know every river bottom and mountain peak like many people know their own neighborhoods. Mountain goats are a fascinating animal to hunt. They live well above the tree line in rocky environments. They are sure-footed and can climb near vertical slopes. Hunting these animals requires one to venture into these dangerous areas too, And you have to be mindful as you pursue an animal like that. One wrong step on a rocky slope or one loose rock could mean that you're not going home ever again. Vern was an expert mountain hunter. It's something that I think that he was born to do. Now Vern decided to hunt in the Hayden River area. It's a familiar spot to most locals, and the area is home to plenty of mountain goats. The first mile of Vern's hike was uneventful as he climbed up the canyon. The air was crisp, and his breath formed in great plumes as he progressed. The sun was just peeking over the mountains when Vern came to a small deer trail. He decided that it might be a nice shortcut from his usual route and took it. A few hundred feet up the trail, he saw something odd pop out from behind a tree, though. It was a man. He was dressed in a light denim coat and jeans and was carrying a small backpack. My cousin stopped for a second to get his bearings, unsure of where this guy came from. The man waved at him with both arms. One of them was holding an older-style hunting bow, and acknowledging him, Vern waved back. Although the man looked to be physically fine, it was clear that he was emotionally distressed. He yelled out something my cousin couldn't quite hear and waved his arm, indicating that my cousin should follow him. Vern didn't get any bad vibes from this guy and could tell that he was genuinely in need of some help. He began to make his way up the canyon following this mystery man. Vern could never gain any ground on this guy, though. He was always just far enough away that he couldn't really talk to him. Periodically, the man would stop, turn towards him to make sure Vern was still following him. Every time that he looked back, Vern could see the worry in his face. My cousin did his best to remain calm and keep a smile on his face, unsure who or what he was being led to. It was peculiar, Vern thought as he hiked. He hadn't seen any other vehicles on his drive up to the trailhead. Perhaps he came in from another ridge or something? What could he possibly be leading him to, though? He figured one of his hunting party had been hurt and needed help. Of course, he wouldn't have had to speculate if the man would just stop and talk to him for 5 minutes. Vern, though, lost sight of the guy just past a turn in the trail. The trail opened up into an incredibly steep, rocky talus slope. He looked in every direction and he couldn't locate the man when he heard a whistle. Looking up, he saw the guy about 500 feet up the rocky slope waving at him. There was just no possible way that he could have gotten up that far in just the short time that Vern lost sight of him. Mind you, he still didn't feel any fear or wariness about the weird situation. The man was waving more frantically now, practically begging Vern to follow him up the slope. With a sigh and a grunt, he started up the rocks. It was slow going. Every other step caused a mini rock slide and could cause him to continually lose his footing. Huffing and puffing on the cool thin air, my cousin eventually made it to a small landing. It had taken him almost 45 minutes to get to that spot where he saw the man from below. There was no earthly way that anyone could have done that scramble up that hill any faster. Totally exhausted though and out of breath, Vern sat down on the stone landing. He looked around and couldn't see the man anywhere at this point. As he scanned his surroundings, he saw something odd poking out of the boulder about 20 feet away from him. Walking over to it, he found a weathered boot. 2 boots, actually. Inside of those boots, and under the boulder as well, were bones. Vern looked around once again for the man, but he never did see him again. Weirdly enough, instead of feeling eerie or unnerving, Vern felt a sense of relief wash over him. He speculates that these emotions were not his own. What he felt seemed to have come from all around him. He marked the spot with his GPS and he decided to make his way down and call the authorities. The county sheriff's office responded and he led them up the canyon to the body. It took 4 grown men to push the boulder out of the way, and when they did, they found the skeletonized remains of a man. On the body, they found hunting equipment and some personal effects. From a credit card in the wallet, they were able to identify the man. He was a bow hunter that had gone missing almost exactly 53 years beforehand. Vern never wanted to be identified to the public or the missing hunter's family. He didn't want any recognition for something like that. To him, it was just one of those bizarre mountain stories that you hear from time to time. He was happy that the family got closure, even if it was half a century later. The only thing that bothered him, though, was the man leading him up the canyon and with his strange and sudden disappearance like that. He had mentioned the waving man to the sheriff, but was brushed off. When news reports came out announcing the discovery, several photos of the man were published, and Vern was absolutely shocked when he saw them. In the photos was the man that he had seen leading him up the mountain to the body. It finally made sense to him, the man's distressful look, the constant checking if Vern was following him, the sense of relief that he felt when the body was discovered. That man was desperate to get home, and through Vern, he was able to be reunited with his family. Tonight's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. So, have you ever felt uncertain about where you're going in life? I know I have. Like, when I came to trying to pick a career path after university, it was a difficult time for me because I was drawn to different options. That and the fact that I was wrestling with finding a career that would be lucrative enough to raise a family. It was a lot of pressure that I had to deal with rather quickly. And whether you're dealing with decisions around career, relationships, or anything else, therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life, so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. I know from personal experience that therapy has a lot of benefits. For instance, finding coping skills and how to set personal boundaries for yourself empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who have experienced trauma in their life, although therapy can certainly help there too. So, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/scared today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/scared. So this is back when I was in grade 1. I was probably around maybe 6. I'm 19 now, and I lived in a really ratty old trailer park in a small town. And this one trailer had a lot of bad stuff happen while I was in there, which I blame on whatever the heck was in there before us. To be honest too, I really don't know where to start. I'm no writer, but I just want to get this out. So, I don't have many memories from this place, mostly just pictures, but they're all bad, very, very bad in fact. My parents were both heavy alcoholics, they kept each other going pretty much. My mother was working at some place where they sell or rent RVs, and my dad was one of those mechanics who would work for whoever paid him. So they had money to drink pretty much every day. I knew that once one of them walked in with a few cases of beer that it was pretty much time to disappear. Anyway, the point is that once people drank in that trailer, they'd transform. Anger, screaming, every form of abuse. One night I was laying in bed asleep facing the wall and I feel a hard slap right on my back. From what I remember, I turned around terrified, thinking at first that it was one of them, and then looked under the bed, then ran to my parents' room and told them what happened. And my mum says that she's never ever heard a child scream like I did. They ran into my room and turned on the light and I was freaking out. From what she made out from my blubbering was that something hit me. They lifted up my shirt and what else do they see but a huge red handprint right on my back. They moved me to their room and I slept with them until I was about 10 after that. I never ever slept facing the wall until I was about 17. And it's funny too because my mum says that she was talking to my auntie on the couch there before or after this event, and my auntie was facing the hallway, mum's back to the hall. She says that my auntie looked toward the hall while they were talking, and her face just went completely white. My mum turned around, didn't see anything, and asked auntie what she had seen. My auntie had to calm down a bit before she told my mum. But apparently she had seen what looked like a little old lady around 4 feet and some kind of sheet or cloak over it walk from my parents' room towards my room. But there was a huge tail dragging out from behind it. Now, they were dead sober this day and they still swear by it. In this house too, I've gotten asthma and sent to the hospital with a combo of chickenpox and pneumonia. I even went deaf at that point. But this house was just awful. I moved out with my mum when I was maybe 10 and happened to drive past there one day to see it getting demolished. And I guess I'm just wondering, what happened there before we moved in? Or why or how that thing ended up in there? That place was old, that much was clear. I'm just happy that that thing, whatever it was, didn't follow us. It's hard to imagine losing a loved one, a wife, a husband, a child. For many of us, it's our biggest fear. Hey, I want to tell you guys about a podcast from Wondery called The Vanished. The Vanished covers unsolved missing person cases that have been overlooked or forgotten by the mainstream media. Every week, host Marissa Jones dives into a new case, sharing the details of their mysterious disappearance from interviews with family, friends, law enforcement, and even suspects in an effort to reveal the truth. The Vanished has even aided in getting long overdue arrests through their in-depth interviews. Marissa reminds listeners of the human behind the headline and aims to help family members find their vanished loved one, or at least a sense of peace. I personally really loved the in-depth analysis that was given in the episodes. That and the interviews with the family, friends, and law enforcement was really interesting too. So, enjoy The Vanished on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also listen to The Vanished early and ad-free on Wondery Plus. Join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app or on Apple Podcasts. Back some 20 years ago, I had a guy that I knew from college that was getting into real estate and asked me to show some homes for some experience, and we were actually looking. I get to the house but don't see his car, and it is pouring rain. I wait in my car for a few, and maybe about 5 minutes later, the porch light turned on. I figured that he must have drove a different vehicle and parked along the road, so I got out and went to the door, but when I got there, it was locked. I knocked, but there was no answer, and I was absolutely soaked at this point. Just as I started back to my car, my friend pulled in. He asked why I was waiting in the rain like that, and I told him what happened. Halfway through my explanation, the porch light goes back off. We approach the door, knock, and again there's no answer. He accessed the key in the agent box, and we go in. We checked the switch inside the front, and it is the one for the porch light, and once it was back on, we looked for a sensor, but there was none. First off, there's creepy vibes and no lights on. As we work through from front to back, we turn on the lights and turn them back off again on the way to the front. The upstairs is accessed in the front of the home, so when we go up, all the downstairs lights are off except for the front room. We go up, start looking at the rooms, and that was when a knocking starts. 3 at first, that makes us both give the "what the heck, did you just hear that?" look to each other. Then after a bit, 3 more, but much louder this time. We started to nope out of there, and as we got the lights out and headed back downstairs, we heard 3 poundings from the hallway at the top of the stairs, now dark but in clear sight. At this, we head for the door quickly, but just as we're getting the key ready for the box, we notice the light in the very backside room is now on again. My friend asked if I would go with him to shut it off, and I convinced him in the end to just leave it on. It seemed very sus, in fact, almost like a trap, I felt, and as a grown man, I was feeling a fear that, honestly, I am very unaccustomed to. As we left, though, the porch light came back on again. We never did go back, but we have driven by several times just to look at that house. So before I begin, I would just like to say that this has been reported to local police with as much detail as possible. So, I've been searching for several hours on who to reach out to and how to put this into words, something that I went through this evening. I came across this place and I decided that this is something that I should share. So, tonight, my girlfriend, 22-year-old female, and I, 23-year-old female, were heading home from a picnic at a local park. As we drove away from the park and approached the stop sign, I noticed that there was a car parked at the stop sign. I remember thinking to myself that it seemed a bit odd. We pulled up to the car and we stopped, and when I looked over, I saw a man, his wrists tied together, a terrifying expression on his face as if he was screaming or crying for help. I instantly froze and asked my girlfriend if she had seen what I did. As we had pulled just forward from the car, she asked what I saw, turned around, and he was still there, wrists together on his steering wheel, staring and making eye contact with her. We both panicked, asking, do we call 911? Do we circle back around? Trying to make sense of what we just saw. And I think it hit us both at the same time when we realized that it was most likely a tactic to lure us closer to his car. I know that I've personally read multiple stories of possible trafficking tactics happening in my county. I'm lucky to have seen these, and I knew to get away as soon as I could. Sure enough, too, when we drove off, he followed us for about half a mile until we got to a busier road and we finally lost him. I've been in a state of fear and confusion and panic ever since this. It may seem like an overreaction, but I have, 1, never been in a fearful situation such as this, and 2, never seen someone tied up before in possible danger before recognizing the signs. I guess that I'm looking for reassurance, wondering if anyone out there had been in the same or similar situation as this and what they did. I'm really shaken up by this, and truly I'm a bit baffled that we live in a world where things like this can happen. Stay safe, everyone. When I was 17, I was asked to babysit for a family friend. She had 4 kids, ages 11 to 4. They lived in a really old house, and the 3 girls shared a room together as well. I babysat really late at night because the mum's work shift was like 8 p.m. to 2 a.m, so I was mainly there to put the kids to sleep and then wait for their mum to come home. Their house always made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. It was old and it made a lot of noises. After I put the kids to sleep one night, I went back to the living room, sat on the couch, and I was just scrolling on my phone. Their dog started barking towards the back of the kitchen. I was confused at what they were barking at, so I thought that maybe the wind outside was spooking them or something. It was really windy that night. They stopped barking, but then started to run back and forth down the hallway between the living room and the kids' rooms. I was trying to calm them down because I didn't want them to wake up the kids. They finally settled down, but then I heard the girls scream. The 3 girls share a room, and they came running out crying, saying, "The man with red eyes and no arms is back in the closet." The oldest said he was staring at us again. I was also scared now. So I told the girls to stay in the living room until their mum came home. I realized their little brother, 4-year-old, was still sleeping in his room next to the girls' room. I couldn't just leave him by himself, so I told myself that I wasn't scared, and I went to get him so that he could be in the living room with all of us. As I was getting him, their dog started running back and forth again, and I could hear the girls say, "He's here, he's here." I got their brother and ran back to the living room, but didn't see anyone except the girls crying. That night, they all fell asleep with the lights on in the living room. The mum was upset at me for not making them sleep in their rooms, so she never asked me to babysit again. To be honest, I was pretty happy about that, but I still shudder when I think about that night. What was that all about? Why did the dogs go nuts like that? Were the kids actually seeing something? Why couldn't I see it? I still have a lot of questions to this day. So I was standing out with my older brother, both of us smoking cigarettes outside of my parents' porch. My family and I grew up in a very superstitious part of the American Southwest. I guess you could say in a part of America where there is a very strong fear of skinwalkers. I know, another skinwalker story, right? But what I witnessed alongside of my brother, honestly, it felt chillingly real. A few years before this incident, my older brother and I encountered something in our parents' backyard, so we've always been a bit on edge at night around our neighborhood, still am to this day. That, and we grew up in a culture that discourages people from wandering around at night without some sort of cultural blessing. But we were a few years older, smoking our cigarettes, catching up, because my brother was attending college in the city, and I was finishing up my junior year in high school. I was rambling on about something when I saw my brother's startled look out at our neighbor's yard. I looked over at what he was staring at and found myself looking at a shadow figure standing outside of our neighbor's house. It's difficult to describe this shadow, as its figure was basically blacker than the night outside the dim glow of the streetlights, having an almost shadow radiance, if that makes any sense. But whatever it was standing on the side of our neighbor's house, and while I couldn't see its face, I just knew that it was staring at our neighbor's draped windows. My brother and I looked at each other with disbelief. I mean, we'd both heard the stories about skinwalkers roaming around at night. We both witnessed that sort of thing years ago, but it was only a glimpse followed by hearing the most otherworldly, horrifying howl that sounded both sort of human and animal. But this was different. It was like seeing something that we were never meant to see, something even more sinister than before. We said nothing to each other, turning our gaze back towards the figure, which was still staring at the neighbor's window. After what seemed like a long moment, the figure started to slowly turn and walk to our neighbor's backyard. But the way that it moved was a surreal sight. It looked to be both sort of moving slow and fast at the same time, like jogging in place, except it was gliding along. Then it moved towards a group of neighborhood dogs, and I knew that these were neighborhood dogs because I recognized almost every one of them under the dim tangerine backyard light, but they weren't scared by the shadow figure. In fact, they almost looked to be welcoming it. The dogs formed a crowd around the figure, which stopped, and I swear to this day, morphed down onto all fours, sprang a back tail, and disappeared into the night with a group of neighborhood dogs following. I looked at my brother and asked, "What did you put into those cigarettes?" We both nervously chuckled, but we knew what we saw, and we hurried back inside, making sure that we took our cigarette butts with us. Inside, our dad and youngest brother were asleep, but our mum was still up. We told our mother what had happened, and she instructed us to go outside to get some wood to burn. She smeared ash on our foreheads, and we ventured outside to gather some firewood. While walking towards the wood pile, we noticed that our streetlight, which was on when we were heading back inside after stamping out our cigarettes, was now out. The only streetlight out in the entire neighborhood. We saw it as a sign of something being around, and we hurried to gather the wood. Right when we were about to head inside, we could smell it, the strong, putrid scent of a dead animal. We knew right there and then that we were in the middle of those stories that we'd heard about skinwalkers. We didn't stop to take a look around, and instead we just made haste back to our house, and we instantly built a fire. We told our mum what we had smelt outside, and she marched outside with a fresh tin of ash to confront whatever was out there. She yelled in English and her native language to leave us alone, we never did anything to you, and commanded it for it to leave by the traditional ways and the way of Jesus Christ. She sprinkled ash outside our front and back porch, and anchored a bow and arrow above the door leading out towards the back porch. We slept that night without any more incidences, but months later, when I moved to a city to live with my older brother and work for the summer, I get a call from my mum. She told me that the neighbor who lived in the house that the shadow figure was outside of apparently had died of cancer. I don't know if that is just coincidence or not, but whatever we saw that night, it still gives me chills when I think about it to this day. This happened about a year ago now. I was living in Barrio Logan in San Diego at the time. My place was the side entrance of a duplex, and the house was right next to a park. One night at around 11 p.m., I was playing Call of Duty. I had my front door open and the screen door locked to help cool the house down. As I was playing with my friends, I heard screaming outside, but thought that it was just my game. But I then heard it again, followed by a female scream. My friends over my headset pointed it out and asked me what was going on in my house. I replied to them that I thought that was my game, and nothing is happening in my home. I got up though and checked outside. Right across the street there was a man shoving a woman around the street and hit her while she was screaming. She pulls out her phone and he grabbed it and threw it across the road at my fence. He never saw me though. He then runs around the corner and she goes the opposite way. I run out and catch her around the corner and I'm trying to help her out. She kept walking and blankly stared at me over her shoulder. I asked her if she had somewhere to go, and she didn't reply. I asked if she needed help, and with that she replied with "go away" in a shaky voice. I was going to turn back to my house when the man whips around the corner and starts screaming at me. He starts telling me that I'm getting into something that I don't need to be in. I got a really weird feeling from that guy. He then puts his hand under his shirt and asks if I'm trying to get shot. I back off and said, "Hey, look, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to get into someone's business. I just saw her crying and asked if she was okay, but I'll let you handle it." I walk past him to go back home, and he starts walking behind me. I started sprinting and sprinted all the way around the block, took the back entrance to the alley, and went inside. I called the police, and 5 minutes later, 5 squad cars zoomed by my home. I'm still not sure if they actually caught the guy or not. So I recently got a job at my local liquor store. My job is 5 minutes away from my place, and I honestly love this job because it's really chill, and since I'm a local, I already know many of the customers that come in on a regular basis. This job helped me get back into contact with a lot of people that I haven't seen for a few years as well. One day, an old friend, his name is Steve, from high school, walks in and he remembers me. We hadn't seen each other for a few years, so we had a nice talk and made plans to hang out with a mutual friend sometime in the near future. I remember that we talked about how our mutual friend would do this thing where he would tell these stories that sounded super fake and made up. For example, he told both of us a story about how he supposedly got shot in the leg, but the story was different every time. Anyway, I tell Steve that our mutual friend is like Paul Bunyan with all his tall tales. Steve laughs and says, "Yeah, totally bro, he is Paul Bunyan." I remember that he had bought some beatboxes, which are this alcoholic beverage that's pretty popular in my store. I remember the exact flavor that he had and everything. And I remember clearly asking him if those things were any good, and Steve tells me, "Yeah, they mess you up." About a week later, I come into work and I see my coworker, Diane. She is acting strange in a way where I suspect that she's going through something tough in her life. She asks me if I remember Steve, and I say, "Yes, of course." She informs me that apparently he had passed away. I asked if it was an overdose, and she told me that it wasn't, but also said that she felt like it was not her place to tell me the real cause of the death. Well, I think it over, and I decide the next time that I see Diane, I would explain to her that I have known Steve since high school, and he's not just some local customer that I met at work. A few days pass, and I see Diane at shift again. Mind you, I work very late, from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. usually. And before I get a chance to talk to her, the manager comes in and Diane goes out to the front to talk to her. I let them have their girl talk for a few minutes, Then I go outside to let the manager know that I need to quickly use the restroom. Well, when I go outside, I overhear Diane say something along the lines of, yeah, it's messed up that they would make the wife pay money to have the brains all over the place cleaned up. The manager replied, oh yeah, she's going to most likely be getting a bill for that cleanup. When I heard this, I knew. I went back inside the store and just felt so sad for my friend Steve. I just stared into space for a few minutes and went back outside to find Diane and the manager kind of staring at me as if they knew that I'd heard what she had said and were waiting for me to mention it. I chose not to, and I waited until I was alone with Diane to discuss the issue. I explained to her that me and Steve, we were high school friends, and she opened up to me after that. Turns out that Diane had an ex who did the same thing a few years back. She really opened up to me about what was going on after this. She told me that Steve had just had a newborn 2 days before the incident, and another boy who was about 4. Steve's longtime partner had been with him for like 8 years straight without any major hitches. Diane tells me that she has known both Steve and his girlfriend since the first grade. They all grew up together apparently. She tells me that she was driving the car with Steve's girlfriend in the back seat, and the widow was finally able to get some sleep in the back seat as Diane was driving. And well, then the 4-year-old decides to ask where Dad is and why he can't see him anymore. They told the kid that he was with God now. It's all just so horribly sad because the poor child thinks that God kidnapped his dad and now he's mad at God apparently. But this is where things get a bit strange. You see, that night I went to restock beverages in the back. It was around 1 a.m. and I suddenly had the sensation that I wasn't alone, and it actually felt as if I was with someone that I knew, but I couldn't see them. I had a feeling that my buddy might try to send me a message. I know that's weird, but I thought to myself that if I see anything, I would try my best not to be scared and pass on whatever message that I receive if possible. Well, I grabbed the exact same beverage that I sold him last time that I saw him and put it onto a shelf. I bent over to pick up something else, and the drink that I had just put on the shelf got smacked really loudly to the ground, as if someone was frustrated or angry and hit it. This made me very uncomfortable, obviously, and I ended up calling some friends to come and chill with me for the rest of my shift. I even took a few shots of whiskey to calm myself down. Later that night, after work, I tell my mum what happened. She explains to me that he might be frustrated and angry at his own sad decisions and the fact that it was too late to change it. My mother is a Buddhist, so she gives me a Buddhist prayer to play at work to bring positive energy. I play the prayer at work the next day, and she also comes to accompany me for part of my shift. But during the prayer, a foam cup also got thrown by nothing, and my mum and I both saw it this time. However, this time it felt like a much more, like peaceful action without anger behind it. Again, I know that's weird to say, but that's just how I interpreted it. Almost as if he was saying that he heard the prayer. My mum told me that she felt that this was him trying to communicate. In my opinion, the prayer did what it was supposed to do, and I feel as if he left peacefully, and the foam cup being lightly tossed was his way of saying, "Hey man, I'm sorry I scared you the other day. It's time for me to go." I miss my buddy, and I hope anyone who hears this that is going through tough times in life gets through it and chooses to live on. Things like this are never the right path, and it will only lead to more pain for everyone involved. I still think about all of this a lot, and to be honest, I can't really make any sense of it, other than that something paranormal happened. For some context, I'm in my mid-20s, working in marketing and sales, have a girlfriend, we have a son and a baby daughter on the way. I don't smoke, don't drink, don't take any pills, I don't have any diagnosed mental illness or disorders or anything. I was always very healthy and a happy kid with a decent childhood, and even nowadays I'm also a happy person. I work hard, but I still believe that I'm privileged in some ways. I'd like to get this off my chest as well and try and understand if others have also had this happen to them. That's why I'm sharing this. So, the earliest memory that I have is from when I was possibly maybe 3 or 4 years old. The best way to describe what I was seeing from my point of view was almost like I was a robot being turned on for the first time. Everything was dark. I remember knowing that I was conscious, but for a good 5 to 10 seconds I couldn't see anything. That's when I finally could see something, but for some reason, everything was in shades of black and white. My eyes adjusted to the light, and I found myself seated in what I believe was my parents' kitchen, fixated on a white tumble dryer as the clothes inside spun around. I couldn't move, and it was total silence. I remember feeling helpless. It was such a weird feeling to describe, but suddenly there was total darkness again, but my consciousness remained intact. It was as if I had just discovered my own existence, and I was feeling helpless and kind of afraid because I didn't want to be in total darkness forever. I really wasn't sure what was going on. The darkness lingered for what seemed like forever. I finally regained my vision. I woke up in a completely black world. Around me were some sort of white towering structures that resembled pillars, with figures made of white smoke perched on top. I couldn't make out any features except for their general presence. I would guess that there were a dozen of them, staring at me. The landscape stretched into what seemed like a labyrinth, and as I tried to make sense of it all, the ground started shaking. I turn around as fast as I can, and a colossal, perfectly round white sphere is coming my way. This was all happening so fast that I wasn't really sure of what to do, so I just panicked and started running around. Again, the feeling of helplessness and fear makes me sweat just thinking about it. But I ran as fast as I could, but the ball was just too fast. It crashed into me, and my memory is crystal clear of me being totally crushed by this thing. Thankfully, there was no pain, only a paralyzing fear. I remember feeling the presence of the white smoke figures around me. Strangely, I felt safe when I sensed them arrive near me. I didn't sense malevolence or that they were going to hurt me or anything. After getting crushed, darkness again. This time, though, it was as if my consciousness had disappeared too. I don't remember a single thing, until my 5th birthday, that is. Then, I have absolutely normal childhood memories. Birthdays, playing with toys, my siblings, exploring nature, first day of school, etc. For years and years, I didn't remember any of this. It wasn't until I was maybe 15 years old that I remember this first memory when I was alone at home, playing some video games. As the memories of that happening rushed back, I literally started shaking in fear, and the feeling was so vivid that I had my first and thankfully only panic attack. I just laid on my bed, tears started pouring down my face, and I couldn't catch my breath. I eventually calmed down by doing some breathing exercises and praying, which was weird for me because I'm not a religious person by any means, but yeah, that's what I did. Once I calmed down, I was still depressed for a few weeks after this experience, and just didn't understand what had happened and where this weird memory came from. I eventually just decided to attribute it to kids seeing and experiencing weird stuff. But it wasn't real, right? Anyway, that's my weird first memory and story. I've never shared it with anyone, and once in a while, especially if I'm quiet, reading or doing something with no noise around me, the memory always comes back and I can relive that stuff in my head very vividly. What I mean is that it definitely feels more like a memory and less like something that I've made up. Luckily, I've learned to suppress it, but every once in a while, I remember getting crushed by a giant white sphere while something watched on. It's 4 a.m. and as I'm sharing this, I'm trying to shake off the nerves, but it's difficult. I had just fallen asleep after a night out at the bar celebrating my partner's friend's birthday. I woke up very suddenly to what I thought was the sound of my door trying to open. I thought that I was crazy, but decided to send my drunk boyfriend to look through the peephole. And he told me that there was a man standing right outside of our door. At the same time, however, there was a woman taking a dog out to potty, so being the drunk that he was, my boyfriend couldn't tell if these two were together or not. The situation just didn't sit right with me though, so I looked through the peephole myself, but when I did, the man was gone. I took watch for about 5 minutes, after which I heard some glass or ceramic break. Eventually, I saw the man walking back in front of my door and around to the other side of the building. We have a corner apartment, so I peeped through the blinds on the living room window side to try and see him. I saw the man approaching a car right in front of my window. I got scared and I stopped looking. I checked again, but he was gone. I then went to look through the bedroom blinds and saw him being handcuffed by a sheriff. We were able to catch the security guard's attention through our bedroom window, and he told us that he'd been suspicious of and following the man for a while now. I really wish that my dog was here. He's boarding because of our night out. He would have scared that guy away with his barks, and maybe I wouldn't be such a nervous wreck. My husband and I moved into this house almost 3 years ago now, and in that time there have been only 2 very strange occurrences, and weirdly enough, I didn't connect the 2 until just now. Now I'm wondering, is there something here? Is there a name for this thing? Well, the first incident happened around 2.5 years ago, I believe. It was shortly after we moved in, I remember that much. I actually shared this somewhere else on the internet, but the way that our house is laid out, it's a semi-open concept where you have to come down on a hallway from a front area in the kitchen or living room area, which occupies the same space, but there's a wall that partially obscures one side of the living room if you're in the kitchen. Now, I was cooking dinner and my dog was lying at my feet, hoping for me to drop some food, I suppose. My husband came down the hallway and went around the corner into the living room without saying a word, and my dog got up and followed him into the living room. I started talking about some work gossip while I cooked, basically droning on for a bit with no response from my husband for several minutes. When I put the food into the oven to cook, I went into the living room planning to sit down with him and wait. Except when I stepped around the wall, he wasn't there anymore. Our dog was on the couch alone. A second later, I heard the basement door open, and it's a noisy door, so there's no way that he could have got up and went down while I was talking to him. Also, it would have been impossible for me to not see him go, since he would have had to have walked back through the kitchen to go literally anywhere else in the house. But he comes into the living room, and I immediately asked if he had been here a minute ago. He looked genuinely confused and said that he had been playing video games in the basement for over an hour at this point. It was creepy and unsettling, but we both just kind of shrugged it off and embraced the spooky story as one to tell my friends who came over to visit. But then, the second thing happened. This was maybe 6 months ago, so about 2 years since the first. I tend to just sort of startle awake from dreams and then be fully awake. It's always been a thing that I do. And this one night I jolted awake and it was still dark out but early morning. We have 2 dogs now and they sleep in the corner of our bedroom. My back was to them and I heard my husband's voice clear as day, unmistakable, in a very quiet whisper praising the dogs, saying things like, "You're such good boys and I love you so much." This is 100% in character for him, mind you, so I didn't think too much of it. I just rolled over towards the sound, about to tell him that I thought that he was sweet. But when I rolled over, he wasn't there at all. He wasn't in the bedroom at all. It was just me and the dogs. In the dark, I couldn't tell if the dogs were awake, but they were lying down calmly. But the fact that this thing keeps impersonating my husband freaks me out. What could it be? It doesn't scare the dogs, and it has never done anything other than just be there. Should I be worried? What should I do? I, a 25-year-old female, have been working at this hospital for a year. I was promoted in March due to the previous night shift supervisor wanting a better job for himself, so I decided, with what I already know about the hospital, I would step up for my co-workers to be their supervisor. I trust myself and only myself with this hospital, but this hospital is horrifying. The amount of things that I've heard, what I've seen, and what it's capable of is insane. So, we have 3 major buildings, and I'll continue by numbering them. Number 1, our first major building, was a morgue on the ground floor, and we use that morgue because we have to. It's just a part of our job. Thankfully, that part of our job has changed drastically, so we do not need to be with the mortician during a pickup, if that makes sense. Originally, we would have to be in the morgue with the mortician to see if any items were left on the deceased. We do not need to do that anymore, and instead what we can do now is, if something makes us uncomfortable, we can stay in the hallway outside of the morgue. We have to let our SOC operator know first, however, and after the deceased has been covered and the mortician is ready, we go back inside the morgue to lock the door. To get the deceased, they need to have the cold room door in the morgue unlocked, and after they find the deceased, we lock the door again. We have to make sure every time that it's locked, and it is our first priority every time. So, that's the first building. Number 2, our next building, is connected to the first building and was made in 2018. I'll be brief about this because we have issues going on at that site right now, but this building is also incredibly haunted. We have CCU and ICU on 2 different floors. Because my mum works here, I also know a variety of different nursing staff and transporters, CNAs, things like that. We patrol this building as well to make sure that nobody is lost and that our clients feel safe. However, due to CCU and ICU, the hallway lights flicker. One time a nurse had me investigate an odd sound that we were hearing, and when I heard it, it was laughter. It sounded like a child, so I reported it, and my co-supervisor at the time told me just to leave the area and try not to think about the incident. Just to make a general activity log and tell our bosses that I investigated. The third is the building that is across the street. I do not go here at all, I refuse to in fact. In this building, I have had my own experiences of being dragged into rooms by an unseen force, choked, and I was also kicked a couple of times from an unseen force. We have tours and checkpoints that we scan, and whenever we do interior patrols, we always feel like someone is watching us non-stop and is following us. I have asked my own weekend officers regarding this building, and they say the same thing as me. They see shadows, they get dragged into rooms. One time, a badge reader was showing green with no one scanning their badge, and the building was locked up. When I was doing a regular shift, I saw a figure in white walking up the stairs, and my ex-boyfriend heard someone walking up the steps as I saw someone too. Then, a couple of weeks later, he saw something that terrified him, and I only heard the sounds. My ex-boyfriend was a very competent guard. He was really experienced, and pretty much nothing scared him. But that night, what we were having followed us scared him to his core. We thought that it was a human because it walked into one of the 3 auditoriums that we have, and when we followed it inside, it just disappeared. The next thing that we heard is something that I guess you could describe as scratching and nails being dragged across the walls. These walls were tall, and that's all that we could hear in the auditorium, nails being dragged deeply. We both decided that that was enough, and we just went outside. I began to vape to ground myself because I was just so scared and I was shaking so much. If anyone has any questions, then please feel free to ask. Yes, I still work at this site, and I return to work tomorrow, in fact, at night at 11 p.m. So, wish me luck. In my late teens and early 20s, my friend and I were out cruising. It was early to mid-fall in Southern California, so not too cold to have the windows open to smoke. I heard a man yelling at someone and I started to look around. We saw a young woman walking down the street, hugging her arms to herself. While it wasn't too cold, it was too cold for bare feet and a spaghetti strap top. We pulled the car, two-door, to the side and asked if she needed a ride. She said yes, and so I opened the door to pull up the seat back and let her crawl in. But as she turned toward me, she had a huge butcher knife in her hand. I slammed the door shut and we took off. And after that, I never offered a ride to anyone ever again. We did call the cops and let them know so that they could check it out. So I'm a 25-year-old female, and this strange thing happened to me just this afternoon. I often take nice and relaxing strolls through the forest on Sundays together with my dad, which is, I guess, some kind of tradition since my childhood, and today was no exception. Sometimes my uncle joins us on those strolls, and today he did so too. So, we walked down our usual paths, and at a split of the path, we met some old man that my dad and uncle obviously knew. The man was walking the opposite direction back towards the village. They did some small talk and then we headed further along the path through the forest, my dad and uncle being a bit ahead of me and talking to each other while I took some photos of the beautiful nature around us. And in the process of walking a bit slower than them and stopping a few times, there were a few times that I was a good distance behind them, which at that point I didn't realize that it could have been dangerous. At some point on the path, we turned to head back home, and as we walked a bit, I stopped for a moment to take a picture of the trees next to the path. Then, after taking the picture, I, for some reason, looked a bit left and was absolutely shocked the moment that I turned my head, because farther in the forest, leaned against one of the trees, stood that old man that we had met before, absolutely still, just staring intensely back at me without any movement and without saying a word. After the initial shock, I decided to just look away and keep on walking, not daring to look behind us most of the way back. I didn't tell my father or uncle about it, but it was just such a weird experience. What scares me the most about it, though, is that I don't have any real explanation as to why that man had been following us, and even more why he was doing so not on the path but just within the forest. And if he didn't have anything creepy in mind, why he didn't say anything but just stared at me like that. To be honest, I'm just so glad that I wasn't walking alone that day. I work at a hospital and I went to the gym in the basement on Saturday evening around 6 p.m. That space is really creepy, and it was extra creepy that day when the hospital was more empty than usual. I was feeling a weird way by the time that I got down there, so when I got into the extra creepy locker room, I put on a sound cleanse. I just learned about these. I felt like it would counter the drab surroundings and the flickering light and get rid of whatever it was that I could tell was so heavy and dark down there. It was really noticeable that something did not like this too. It felt like I was much more uneasy using the gym than I ever had been before. I kept the cleanse on the whole time and I still was anxious as heck. And in the end, I went home and I went to a movie that night. Sunday all day was good, maybe some ominous overtones. As it got later and stormed and was darker in the evening, it felt like whatever set up shop in the basement was now attached to me. By the time that I went to sleep, it was heavy, low energy that was just a menace to my mental state. And then when I was awoken at around 12:30, I was woken up by something speaking a curse word in a demonic-sounding alien language directly at my forehead. Obviously, I completely freaked out, and the weirdest feeling was that it felt like a bubble that something blew into my head popped. It struck me as some kind of curse word, I guess, but I also immediately thought that it had to do with the tourmaline that I wear on my neck. I've been wearing it to sleep now for a couple of weeks, but after this, I was awake for hours and put back on some of the cleanse sounds that I had found. I ate and stayed out of my bed for 30 minutes and was able to eventually go back to sleep. Now though, I just get this feeling that something wants to set up shop in my apartment. I broke a plate this morning, and when I was down in that gym, I got the weirdest headache too. These all may be unrelated, but still, I'm really on edge and I just don't know what to do. I was a sophomore in high school when this happened. It was during May, and I stayed after school with half of my grade due to an award show that was going on. It was conducted by the literature department and our principal. Me and my group actually won the Best Message Award for our short film too. Anyways, after the award show was over, me and my friend went back to our classroom to change into more comfortable clothes and to spend some more time together while we waited for our parents to come and pick us up. Only 5 of us were in that classroom at that time. As the time went by, 3 of my friends left with their parents. It was only me and my best friend in the classroom at this point. 30 minutes later, her dad called her to say that they were waiting for her on the school's yard. By the way, our classroom is on the 3rd and highest floor. Together, we walked down the stairs to the ground floor though. She asked me if I wanted to come outside with her and maybe wait in the waiting area next to the security. To this day too, I really curse myself for not saying yes to that. Instead, I said no and decided to wait in the waiting area inside our building. I could have went to my principal's office and waited with her since she likes spending time with me anyway and talking to me. If you couldn't tell, I was a bit of a nerd and one of the top people in my grade. In my school, there were 5 couches in the waiting area for both students and parents. As I was walking to the waiting area, I saw a janitor but didn't think much of it. I put my bags down, but as I was about to sit down, I don't know, I just had a weird feeling, like he was watching me and my moves. I felt really uneasy, too uneasy to sit down, so I stayed standing up while holding my bags in case I had to run or throw them to save myself. As a reflex, I raised my head and looked at him. He continued to look at me. It was as if we were in a race where neither of us were looking away. Believe me when I say that I wanted to look away but couldn't. Maybe it was because I saw him as a threat, or maybe it was because I was too scared and uncomfortable to move. But whatever the case was, he made this weird smirk on his face, but since it was getting dark, I couldn't exactly tell what that was all about. I don't know how long we looked at each other, but I broke out of my trance when I saw my classmate from the previous year walking outside the building. In a desperate attempt, I waved at her and she saw it. But then I remember her coming in and walking towards me saying, "I saw someone waving," to which I replied with, "Oh, it was me. I thought that you left and was surprised to see you, so I waved at you. And actually, if you don't mind, can you walk with me to the waiting area next to the security?" As we were walking outside, I looked back and saw the janitor still staring at me. I was wearing high heels, a short skirt, and a tight shirt, but it was an award show and we wanted to dress up. I don't think that this sort of stuff really happens to women because of what they wear, but I do think that he was staring at me because of my attire. At the waiting area next to the security, I was so anxious while waiting for my mum, thinking, what if he actually comes in here? Even when my mum came and when I got into the car, I was shaking slightly and wasn't in the headspace to speak about anything. So I told my mum that we got an award, but I was just too tired to speak. In any case, later on, I found out the weirdest thing. That janitor that I saw apparently didn't work at the school. I don't know if that means that it was just someone dressed up as a janitor or he was covering for someone else or something. Whatever the case, I will never forget the predatory look on his face. I'm 49 and male, and by the time that I'd reached my early 20s, I was of the opinion that there was nothing to life but what you could see or touch, nothing else. I guess the best way to start would be to tell you about a friend that I had in high school, Todd. I had met him through another guy that I had knew since like 6th grade. Todd was just a really good guy, always upbeat, loyal, just a really solid person. Looking back on it, he was probably the most genuine human being that I'd ever met, including up until now. We were around the same age though, and when I was around 19, it had been a while since I'd seen him, and our mutual friend calls me and tells me that Todd's house had apparently caught on fire, and he unfortunately had passed away trying to save his younger siblings during that fire. I cannot remember exactly, but I know that he made several trips in the house, saving at least 2 of his siblings, and went in again and the roof collapsed on him and another one just like 5 foot from the door, killing them both. It was just a horrible thing and I couldn't believe it. It was the first person, other than an elderly family member, that I knew who had passed away. Anyway, fast forward to 4 to 5 years from that. I'm in my car heading to a friend's house that lives in the same neighborhood where this happened. I'm maybe a mile or so away from where I'm headed, and about 100 yards or a little more ahead of me, walking towards me, there is a guy in jeans and a dark hoodie, hands in his pockets and his head down, looking at the ground as he is walking. For one, this is how I remember Todd too. Seems like I always remember him wearing jeans and a hoodie and maybe a jean jacket, but what really caught my eye was his gait. I think that Todd had a leg that was a little bit longer than the other one or something. He just had a sort of limp is what I'm getting at. I could have picked him out of a crowd just by his walk anywhere. It was really unique. So as we're getting closer to each other, I just feel something is not right or just off or something. I can't really put my finger on it, but as I get to him, I slow down and stop right next to him, and he stops as well. As we both come to a stop, he raises his head and looks right at me. We were about 10 feet apart, one of a 2-lane road, and he looks at me and it is him. And his face is glowing with the most brilliant green that you could imagine. We look at each other for maybe 4 or 5 seconds. It seemed like he had this sort of calm and peaceful look on his face though. I think I was in shock, I guess. I don't know, but I let my foot off the brake and coasted probably 30 or 40 feet down the road, stopped again, but I was too scared, I guess is the word, to look back, so I sat there for a few seconds and just pulled off and went to where I was going. Now, I've heard people talking about the colors in heaven being so much brighter or just more beautiful than colors here while explaining near-death experiences, and I think I get it now. I think that's where this green maybe was coming from. In any case, about a week before this happened, I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine, and I explained to him that I was an atheist. But now I truly believe that Todd was on that road that day to let me know that there was something else, more to life than just what we can normally see. It changed my whole outlook on life in a split second. And well, that's pretty much what happened. I have had experiences since then, but the rest are dark, and maybe I'll get to those another time. This one always sticks with me though, because, well, Todd was a good guy and I miss him. I would like to preface this by saying that I got home about an hour ago and this actually happened. I've never had paranormal encounters and genuinely try to approach everything with a questioning mind, I guess you could say. My partner and I like to hike at a local park late at night. It's a historic park in PA, about maybe 3,500 acres in size, that spans over into MD and DE borders. One of the trails allows you to cross through all these 3 states. The entire park is mostly dense woods with a creek running through. Usually we park near an old church with a Revolutionary War cemetery that is famous for a grave known as the Ticking Bomb. I've been to every corner of this park, day or night. We usually hike a short loop that is roughly a half mile in length. We've walked this trail literally thousands of times and never once felt anything strange. But tonight, was different. We made a spontaneous decision to go on a night hike and left the house at about 10:45 p.m. I decided to take the narrow dirt road to our usual parking spot rather than driving a mile up the road to a paved access road like we normally do. About halfway down the ragged dirt and gravel road, as we rounded a corner, an animal dashed across the road in the path of our headlights. Now, I have never seen anything like this animal, and I've never seen an animal that size in this area that I couldn't immediately identify. Its size was somewhere between a dog and a human, and it moved so quickly it almost looked like it flew. A literal black blur with some hazy details and bright silver eyes. My partner also saw it. I'm generally a skeptic, so I just wrote it off and we both just kind of explained it away. But we made it to our parking spot and pretty much resolved not to talk about it and continue on as usual. Immediately when we got to our trail, we noticed that the frogs and the cicadas were extremely loud, louder than I'd ever heard them at night around here. As we progressed down the trail, it felt like we had to talk over the cicadas. We sort of quietly yet frantically attempted at lightening the mood with the conversation. Unbeknownst to me at the time, about 100 meters down the trail, my partner had begun to hear what he thought were extremely distant voices. I also noticed that the cicadas got progressively quieter the further that we got down the trail. We made it about a quarter mile before a sudden, louder sound felt like it cut through the space between my ears. It was something like a glitching microphone or megaphone way off in the distance. My partner pointed out to me later that there was nothing for the echo to bounce off of in that area, so it was weird. The moment that we heard that sound, though, I stopped immediately and asked if he had heard it too. Not only had he heard it, but he was convincing himself that he was hallucinating the sounds the entire time until I finally acknowledged it. Without discussion, we both immediately turned around and started walking at a fast pace back to the car. I felt like it was a bad idea to run, but we had to leave right away, no doubt. We hoofed it back to the car with the feeling that something was following us all the way to the entrance. When we finally got back into the car and started driving, the feeling of urgency, it didn't go away. We made it all the way down the main road to our first turn, and I felt a moment of complete confusion. As I slowed to the turn, my partner asked me, "Do you not know where you are right now? Because neither do I. We have literally driven this road thousands of times. I made a split-second decision to turn right, which was thankfully the right choice. The next road went along the perimeter of the park and parallel with the trail that we were hiking. There was tons of fog, which hadn't been there on the way in. We spent about maybe 20 minutes at the park, and just as we made our way past the area that we had turned around, another animal darted across the road in front of our headlights, and it looked exactly like the one that we saw on our way in. Only this time, it was much closer and in way more detail. Whatever it was, it had silver eyes and what looked like ears or horns maybe. It was still insanely fast and either a blur or a wraith or something, and to be honest, I just don't know how else to describe it. I get this really weird feeling when I think about it though, or even talk about it. The feeling started when I saw it run across the road the second time. I feel like it's because I acknowledged that, or whatever that thing was. I couldn't explain it. I feel an almost burning sensation in my sinuses, my eyes water, and I get a strange sort of tingling in the back of my skull. Like I said before, I'm usually a skeptic when it comes to this kind of stuff, but this experience, it's really left me rattled. When I was ages 9 to 11-ish, my family and their friends would rent out a different home every summer in the Poconos. Most of her friends and those who had kids would come by every weekend to swim, fish, and party, and during the week, whoever took off from work, they could stay there. My mother took off 1 or 2 weeks from work, I think it was, and it was just us two at the home during this week. We were in bed, talking as we usually did before going to sleep, when we heard footsteps and movement downstairs. My mum immediately shushed me to get a better hearing of what was happening. I personally didn't immediately get alarmed by it, but I remember asking why. My mum just said shush, with a sense of urgency and fear that made me instantly nervous. I knew then that we were there alone and had now realized that somebody else was downstairs. These footsteps were very loud and not trying to be quiet. After a minute or so, we heard them approaching the stairs. Once my mum realized that these noises were in fact happening, she snapped into action and quietly ushered me out of bed. She started to open the window. We were on the second floor bedroom, with a flat roof directly outside of our window. At the same time, the footsteps started to loudly climb up the stairs. I was so scared, and my mother was telling me to climb out the window. In her mind, these were robbers or intruders that might want to cause us harm. I kept refusing, but slowly started to approach the window, about to go out, when the heavy footsteps reached the top of the stairs. I remember every step with us getting more frightened. We heard it right outside of our bedroom, and then they completely stopped, and it was all very quiet again. We froze, not making a sound for what felt like forever, but it was probably like a few minutes, our hearts beating so quickly now. My mum eventually opened the door. When she did, there wasn't anyone there. She eventually checked the whole house, including downstairs, and the weirdest thing is that nothing was disturbed. It was completely empty, like nothing ever happened. It was a very strange experience that I still remember to this day, and whenever I bring it up to her, she's like, yeah, I don't know what happened, but maybe ghosts or spirits could be real? Another weird thing that I found in that house while exploring with other kids was one of the closets downstairs had an extra little door in it. We opened it one day and it was another crawl space sized closet with a pillow and blanket inside. Looking back, I often do wonder if perhaps we actually disturbed someone. For some background, our neighborhood is full of houses built probably in the 80s. They're not that old, but old enough for some to look abandoned. We don't live in the suburbs or anything too. It's a very small neighborhood, on top of a low hill, right next to a small forest. We live very close to each other, so late night parties are pretty much a no-no around here as well. So you've got the picture now, and I'll get on with it. I've only moved once, but it was at a very young age, and because I was so young, I'm not sure if there were any occurrences before the move or not. However, I do remember a bunch while I've been living here. I'll start with the more regular things. So only ever at night I would hear footsteps on the roof. They're very clear, quick footsteps as well, almost as if someone or something is running on the roof. My room is on the second floor, so the roof is right above me. I decided to ask my father about it once, and my sister chimed in saying that she hears it too. I guess he didn't really have an explanation since he didn't even respond to my question in any way other than a chuckle. Another common thing is door handles and doors being constantly flung open and shut up and down. I distinctly remember that our parents' room's door flung open once. Not a slow creaky sound, but a full-on swing. The only people in the house were me and my sister, and the dogs were with my dad's wife at the time. Sometimes our things would be misplaced, even completely missing, and maybe that's just our minds playing tricks on us, like we forgot something or whatever, but it was really frequent, and I don't know, there were some occasions where I could have sworn that they had moved. But here's the interesting part, I guess. It was some months ago, somewhere during October. I was home alone, which isn't that unusual for me. My parents were at work, sisters at practice, and the house isn't exactly new, so it makes those creepy sounds that you hate at night. And well, it was just those sounds that made me walk out of my room. The stairs lead straight to the front door, so I could see from upstairs that it was open. I yelled out for my dad or his wife, even my sister, but there was no answer. I yelled again. Still silence. Annoyed, I made my way down the stairs, only to be shocked by the fact that nobody was in the driveway. I instantly slammed the door shut and began panicking. Was there an intruder inside? A murderer? Or maybe some random homeless person or something? Well, the first thing my brain told me to do was run back up to my room and stay there until somebody got home. I waited there, scared out of my mind that somebody would be in the house. When my dad's wife came home, only around 10 minutes later, I told her about it right away. She grabbed a long kitchen knife and started searching the house, but in the end, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I mean, we checked everywhere, you name it. The closets, the attic, even the chimney, but there was nothing. I was frantically sobbing the entire search, and up to this day, everybody swears that they locked the door after themselves. And to be honest, I knew that they did too, because I always check after they leave, and I did this day as well. Another incident, which happened way back, somewhere in the wintertime. As per usual, the running sound on the roof was happening again. At this point, we were living in this house for almost a year, I think. I got sick of it this time and went downstairs to sleep in my parents' room. I still heard it, but it just wasn't as loud. And strangely enough, it wasn't on the roof anymore. The sound was slowly making its way down the side of the house. I freaked out a bit at that, and saw my parents doing so too. They tried to calm me down as my dad went outside to check what it might be. I fell asleep before he came back, so I'm really not sure what happened. I've tried asking him about it, but he won't tell me anything. And I still wonder what actually happened that night. I'd tell you more too, but right now I'm just way too tired to keep going. I know some of this might sound a little bit silly to some people, like some of it might have just been nightmares or things that I'm imagining. I've thought that it was my mind playing tricks for the longest time too, since our family has a history of mental health altogether. My dad's wife's side, at least. If anybody has an explanation other than this though, then please do help me out. I mean, have I invited some sort of spirit, or is it a demon, or is it something completely different? I don't know, but I really just wanted to get this all off of my chest, once and for all. In the early 2000s, I was an outside sales rep, and my best customer was a charter school. Built in 1891 as a school for Indians and colored people apparently, it operated for more than 100 years, educating thousands of children from larger cities across the nation, focusing on farming and industrial trades. On its nearly 300 acres were 6 buildings, including 2 dormitories and an old frame church. I ended up spending multiple hours on campus every week performing various functions and tasks. I loved the school and staff so much that I enrolled my daughter in their first pre-K class too. And very early on, the business manager and I became friends, and he told me what he knew about the history of the site and the industrial school. He had been a lifelong resident of the town the school was in and knew much about it. He also told me of the ghost. Their ghost had appeared to nearly every member of the school staff, typically seen simply walking through the grounds in the early morning and evening hours. At the time, the entity was simply described as looking like an older man dressed in early 20th century work-type clothes. My first experience happened on the day the dedication ceremony was held prior to the charter school officially opening. Said ceremony was attended by numerous state and local officials. A dais had been erected in front of the chapel, with power for the sound system provided via a very long and thick power cable. As the chapel had no electricity run to it, the power cable had been run from the dormitory-turned classroom building about 100 feet away. At the end of the cable was a monstrous black plug. Think a 220 dryer or oven plug or something on steroids. This was plugged into a temporary power board erected behind the chapel. From there came the various extension cords run to the front of the chapel itself. As the ceremony began, I was standing with the business manager to the side and well behind the dais. We were a few feet further back than the rear of the chapel. From there we could see the attendees and turn our heads to see the power board. The power board was roughly 12 feet behind the middle of the chapel. The extension cords run through the building directly to the dais so as to be out of the way. And at one point, there was a loud pop as one would hear when a speaker is unplugged while turned on. The microphone went out and the person speaking could just barely be heard. We both looked over to see the plug itself was out of the power board and on the ground. I turned to face him and he started to tell me to go plug it back in while he went up front to let the folks know what was going on. He didn't get to finish it as in that 2 to 3 seconds, the power to the microphone was somehow restored. We looked in each other's eyes in a rather what the heck moment, then turned to see the plug was now somehow back in the power board. There was no one within 50 feet of it. We were the only people behind the building, and the outlet for the plug was about 3 to 5 feet off of the ground. When I looked back at the business manager, he simply said, "There's our ghost." And that was it. The second incident was the first time that I've ever seen a ghost or entity in my life. My company was installing the network cables for the classrooms in the main building. The design of the building was pretty straightforward. A central section with main office, nurse, cafeteria, and gym with 2 hallways running perpendicular to that, one on each side. The day that we started was the day after all of the door locks in the building had been changed. I was helping the techs that day as we were a small company and didn't have a proper IT staff. I was friends with the school secretary, and she made me promise that I wouldn't lose the key that she was giving me, as it was not only the master key, it was the only key that they had for the new locks, as the locksmith hadn't dropped the rest of the keys off yet. So we went to the basement to gain access to the crawl space that ran under each classroom hallway. The secretary showed us the basement door, gave me the key, then locked the door behind us so as to prevent any students from coming down to the basement. Each crawl space was maybe 100 feet long with a single bare light bulb hung at the far end. The entry to the crawl space was about 5 feet off the floor, and the crawl space slowly tapered from a ceiling height of about 5 feet to just about 3 feet at the far end. It was maybe 5 foot wide, but it was definitely tight. So the tech and I had been running cables for a couple of hours and were down the crawl space furthest from the stairs leading down from the main level, which we could just see the bottom of from where we were. We were just about halfway down and I was to the left of my tech, with him between me and the basement. At one point I caught movement out of my peripheral and looked past him to the basement. And what I saw was an older looking white man, maybe early 60s, salt and pepper hair, wearing what I would have said were medium brown khakis and a dark green or blue work coat. He was back just far enough from the crawl space entrance to see him from the knees up. When I asked my buddy who that was, 2 things happened. First, my brain realized that I couldn't tell the exact color of the man's coat because he was transparent, and my buddy's knees buckled and he fell back into me. When he turned to look at me, his face had gone completely grey. I looked back, and the man was gone. I maneuvered around the tech and headed up the crawl space instantly, keeping the bottom of the stairs in sight the entire time. In my head, I was thinking some kid had gotten into the basement and was screwing with us. I got to the basement, dropped down to the floor to find the basement empty. The door at the top of the stairs, there were 2 flights of stairs as the ceiling was about 15 feet high and they turned halfway down so the bottom of the stairs were directly across from the hole to the crawl space, was still locked. I opened the door to find the head custodian and the principal chatting in the hall. I asked if they had seen a student just come up and they told me no. In fact, the custodian said that he'd been cleaning up after a kid had vomited in the hall, and no one had been in or out of the basement in the 30 minutes or so that he'd been there. I walked to the main office and asked my secretary friend who else had a key to the basement door. She told me again that there was just the one key in the entire building, and apparently I was the only one who had it. Then she grinned broadly and asked why. I detailed what I'd just seen, to which she said, "Ah, you've seen him too. That's our ghost." Apparently, he takes an interest in any changes that are being made to the buildings and just shows up to watch. In the midst of this, the tech comes bursting through the basement door, his gear bag over his shoulder, hauling butt to the main entrance. He looks ill as well, and I head out after him, calling his name as he raced across the campus to the parking lot. He's in his truck and gone, without ever even acknowledging me. He told the office that he drove straight home and then called out the next day. I worked closely with him for several more years. The one time that I asked him what happened to him, what did he see in the basement, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I'm not talking about it, ever, so don't ask and don't involve me if you talk about it." Now, he was a really nice guy, and like I said, we'd worked together for years. It was really the only time that I remember seeing him when he didn't have a smile on his face. I personally never experienced anything else, but over the years, anyone that I've run into who has spent a good deal of time at that school has experienced something. Teachers, staff, parents, coaches, and the like. Having said that, I've never heard of any students. Having said that, though, interestingly enough, I've never heard of any students experiencing anything. I would have been about, maybe 3 to 5 years old at this time. I wasn't in school yet, but I wasn't using diapers anymore, just underwear. We lived in Arizona, though, in the early 80s. I had my own room, and my parents were in the room next to mine. It would get hot as well, so I just slept in my underwear on my stomach. My family was friends with our neighbor, who lived in the apartment next to ours. I remember he was a pretty cool guy who was always super nice to me and gave me candy. And one time he was working in the attic, and the wood was so bad up there that he actually fell through into our apartment once. It was a complete mess, and now, my dad, like other people in the 80s, was into drinking and doing drugs. He was always good to me, but he did like to go out with the fellas and party from time to time. Our neighbor also liked to party, so they would usually go out together and come back late at night. And it seems my dad could handle partying a little and not going overboard, but as for our family friend, he was very much not like that. Now, I don't know the exact story, but there were 2 rumors how he died. One was that he ended his own life from his drug addiction, and the other that he was actually murdered for a drug deal and made to look like he killed himself. Either way, he was found dead near a native reservation hanging by a palm tree. Being so young, I really didn't understand what death was at the time. My family and I went to the funeral viewing, though, and the burial. The next week, we visited his grave, and I was really confused as to why my candy buddy wasn't around anymore, so I asked my parents where he was. They told me that he was deep in the ground near his headstone. Being a child, I started hopping up and down on his grave, yelling his name, and asking if he was down there. And well, my mum didn't like that very much, and told me to stop, so I did. Now that night was just normal, and then it was time for bed. So I'm in my underwear falling asleep on my stomach, and it felt like I was right about to fall asleep when I heard our family friend whisper my name. I jolted up and looked around, but there was nothing there. There were no other voices, and I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I did run into my parents' room, though, and I told them what happened, and after that, I slept with them that night. I never again did sleep with my stomach in my underwear after that. I always have to have a sheet or blanket on now. I never heard the voice again, but I do distinctly remember hearing his voice that night. I knew that it was his voice, and I knew that I heard something. Also, I never did jump on anyone's grave ever again after that. This experience happened a while back, but I thought that I might as well share it on here for you guys to hear. So, Back in the mid-2000s, I lived in this house with my dad, my mum and my sister. Across the road from this house was this massive mansion which had a lot of residential turnover which my family, me included, believes is cursed. My sister and I were kind of scared of it, to be honest, because it was this big, dark house that felt uninviting and cold. When my family moved into our house, there was a wealthy businessman living in the mansion across the road who moved in a few months before us. This guy was really rich, like think luxury cars, massive dinner parties with his rich friends, etc. Apparently, he owned a bunch of businesses, started a new business shortly after we moved in, and after almost 6 months of starting this business, he went bankrupt. He apparently lost everything. He sold all of his luxury cars, he had no more dinner parties, and he also quickly became an alcoholic. He ended up selling his house because he of course couldn't afford it. But after he sold the house, a young, recently married couple moved in. I have no idea how they afforded the house, but nonetheless they moved in and settled in quickly. My parents actually became quite good friends with them, and we would have them over for dinner occasionally. They stayed in the house for about 2 years, but within that 2 years they had 3 miscarriages. The wife ended up becoming depressed and even had to be committed to a psych ward because she was thinking about deleting herself. These 2 incidences could be just classified as bad luck, I know that. Perhaps unfortunate events, but the third one, in my opinion, solidifies that this house is cursed. So another couple moved into the house after the other couple decided to move, and this couple were pretty wealthy. They hired a maid to stay in the house and to assist them with cooking and cleaning, etc. After a year of them living there, we once again got pretty close to this couple and would sometimes have them for dinner too, and swim in the pool that they had as well. One night, my dad woke up and had a strange feeling. Apparently, he heard something outside, so looked out of his bedroom window and saw the maid packing her car in the middle of the night. The couple that was living there was apparently away for the weekend, and the maid was staying at the house by herself. He thought that it was weird and was a bit concerned, but didn't think too much of it and went back to sleep. After he went back to sleep, he had a terrible nightmare that the maid ended up ending her own life in the garage of the house. He woke up in the morning a bit shaken from this dream and had a sort of sixth sense feeling. He decided to go over there and check if everything was okay. He rang the doorbell but didn't get an answer, so he decided to go around to the back of the house to see if the back door was unlocked. The back door was unlocked, so he went in. He entered the living room and, sure enough, his dream had come true. He instantly ran home and called the police and ambulance, but by the time that they got there, and by that point, it was too late. I remember seeing my dad after the event, and he was as white as a ghost. Of course, he didn't tell us what had happened as we were only young. He ended up telling us when I was about maybe 15 or 16 or something, and I don't really bring it up to him because he hates talking about it and gets really upset about the whole thing. We moved a little bit after the last event happened. I still have no idea what happened to the next family that moved in, but I seriously hope that nothing bad happened to them. To this day, though, I am convinced that that mansion is cursed. This story takes place in a very small town in the northeast region of the United States in the summer before I went off to college in 2015. After I graduated high school, my parents decided to move to a smaller, more affordable house about 45 minutes north into the mountains. We stayed in my childhood home because the public schools in my area were the best in the state, and my parents really valued my education. I ended up going off to an amazing university, and now I have an incredible career because of my excellent education. As most people in the US know, amazing public education usually means higher property taxes. My parents got to the point where they could not afford the taxes on their 4,000 square foot home anymore, and they decided to sell it just after I graduated from high school. Their home is humble, and it sits on a beautiful piece of land on the side of a beautiful mountain. The trees are always really green and there's a lot of wildlife around too. They don't have many neighbours either, as their driveway is about 1.5 miles long. But this is what they chose to live in after I went off to college. In August of 2015, we moved into a new house. I wasn't planning on staying long as I was getting ready to head off to college as a freshman for the first time. We decided to have a little bit of a housewarming party with a bunch of family friends, and my best friend at the time came as well. My dad was manning the barbecue, my mum was making drinks, we were playing with our dogs. It was a really nice time and everybody had a lot of fun. My dad had built a brick fire pit in our backyard as well. Just to set the scene here for you, the fire pit was about 30 feet from our back patio door, and we had a picnic table and other seats all around. Behind the seating was the tree line, and sometimes at night, it was incredibly dark. You needed a flashlight to see even 10 feet in front of you. With the fire pit lit, you couldn't really see somebody else unless they were either sitting next to you or across from you in front of the pit, and what I'm getting at is that it was really hard to see. Anyway, my best friend decided to stay the night, and we asked my dad if we could make some s'mores. As it was getting a little chilly, as it does in the late summer in the northeast at night, my parents left us outside with my dog Nino. Nino was a huge 100-pound black lab pit bull mix. He was such a loyal and incredible dog that my dad trained as his right-hand man pretty much. He was our protector, as he could run extremely fast, was very strong, and alerted us when something went bump in the night. Side note, he passed away a week before I got married in 2022. He was 17 years old and lived an adventurous life with my parents, hunting squirrels, laying out in the sun, and running amok, so he had a good life. Nino, though, laid in between us, facing the tree line, and my best friend was at my right. Our backs were to the dark, dense tree line, which was our first mistake. We were laughing, joking, and eating s'mores together, planning for the future and generally excited about going off to college together. She decided to play some music, and we just relaxed, feeling content and at ease. It was a really, almost perfect summer night, until Nino started growling. I saw his ears perk up and his head sort of cocked to the side. He then sat up and continued to growl. My best friend and I both looked at each other, thinking Nino just heard a stray animal or something non-threatening. This area was known for lots of deer and rarely a coyote or a wolf as well. As he was trained to help my dad hunt deer, we assumed it was a buck or a fawn in the distance behind us. So we went back to singing along to the music playing and just talking about our fall 2015 class schedule. But again, Nino started growling, which was our second mistake. We didn't call out for my dad. We didn't even think that there was a problem until Nino started barking repeatedly. This time louder and more vicious. He stood up and started barking as if alerting us to activity beyond the tree line that we couldn't see. At this, we stood up as well, the fire obscuring our view. My best friend took her phone, paused the music, and turned on her flashlight. She started to walk towards the edge of the tree line with Nino by her side, still growling and barking, alerting us to not go any further and to call for help. We stood still in silence, listening. I was too afraid to even breathe at this point, I think. She started walking into the woods, though, and when she shined her flashlight, she saw a figure. Someone was there, peering behind a tree. A man with a green suit and green pants on, about 5'11", with glasses too. We screamed and ran as fast as we could inside, leaving the fire unattended and this creepy man behind the tree. What we didn't know at the time is where this man actually came from. In any case, we crashed through our front door, breathless with Nino trailing behind us, and startled my mother, who was washing dishes at the time and cleaning up from the party. She was talking to my dad about something they saw on the news, and I think we cut him off mid-sentence to explain that there was a man dressed in all green lurking behind a tree in the woods. Obviously, we didn't know how long he'd been there or if he was still there, but we were both crying. I remember feeling extremely sick, like I was about to throw up, and my dad jumped up, grabbed his shotgun and headlamp, and ran outside with Nino. My mum gathered us into the living room, shut all the lights off in the house, and locked the doors. She told us to be quiet and that she was going to call 911. As she did that, my best friend and I shook in fear. We were anticipating gunshots and screaming at some point, but thankfully we never heard any. My mum, now on the phone with 911, described what we saw to the operator, and I heard my mum say, "Oh," in a really alarming way. At this point, my dad came back inside and my mum let him know that the police were on their way to us. Being in a small town on the mountain with less than 10,000 people, that means that we don't get our own police force. We get the state police every time that there's a call made to emergency responders. My dad, though, he put his gun away and waited outside for the police to show up. And to our bewilderment, they didn't just send a police officer, but 10, and an entire SWAT team and helicopter to circle the area. We were obviously and rightfully terrified. I was practically having a panic attack at this point. The police officers came inside of our home and asked my best friend and me what the man was wearing, what he looked like, etc., if we were able to discern any scars or tattoos. We explained that we had matching green outfit and the glasses. The officer excused himself and alerted the police and the SWAT members outside of our description. They started to search the woods behind our home with guns drawn at this point, flashlights and the helicopter circling above too. They advised us to stay inside and that they would let us know when or if they found something. After about 25 minutes, we got another knock on our door. It was not one, but two officers this time. My dad let them in and they began to explain the situation. One officer explained that we must have seen on the news that a convicted felon from prison about 20 miles away escaped into the mountains. The police had apparently set up a perimeter of 10 miles around the prison, but the convict escaped them yet again somehow. The outfit that the man was wearing, as well as our description, signaled to them that the escaped convict was 100% lurking through our remote, densely wooded backyard that night. The all-green outfit was a standard issue for prisoners in my state at that time. They did not, however, find the man near us after 25 minutes of searching, which means that he was still out there somewhere. The officers let us know that they were going to have a squad car stay and watch our house for a few days as they were unable to locate the fugitive and believed that he's still an active threat to our safety. That night, and for 3 nights after that, we all slept in the living room together. My dad's shotgun was within arm's reach of him at all times, too. Later that week, we got another knock on our door from officers stationed outside of our home. They let us know that the man was back in police custody finally and that we were now safe. They advised us to get security cameras and how sorry they were that this happened to us. After that, my parents spent about $10,000 on security cameras and fencing for our backyard. It's now all fenced in and we have about 4 cameras to watch the tree line at all times too. And I guess because you just never really know what will actually happen or what goes bump in the night, it's probably worth it. This is an experience that I had a few years ago, which honestly made me a believer in the paranormal, and I hope you find it as interesting and as creepy as I did. So, I went out very early morning around 5 a.m. to take photos in the forest since I've always liked the vibe of the forest, especially during the morning since it has a kind of calmness to it. I live in central Sweden where we have many deep forests everywhere, where much of it is untouched. Think plenty of moss and old trees. This particular forest that I went to was quite near my home. However, since I lived in the countryside, I was very alone with nobody else around, for miles in fact. During this morning, there was also fog lingering in the treetops from the surrounding rivers, which looked very cool to be honest, so I was really ready to take some really nice photos. I went into the forest after parking my car along the road that went beside it and started walking straight in. After maybe 100 meters, I stopped to take some photos, mostly of dead trees and mushrooms and things like that. I was 20 and felt very artsy at the time, so yeah, I was just like that. But after a few minutes, I started to hear knocking on trees. I thought it was probably a bird, since we have woodpeckers around here, so hearing that wasn't unusual, I guess. But the strange thing was that I started looking for it since it came from a tree that was right beside me, but I just couldn't find it anywhere. Unlucky, I thought. I wanted to see if I could get a nice photo after all, but I decided to move on in the end. I continued walking into the forest when I noticed something. The knocking or the pecking seemed to follow me as I walked. It continuously knocked on trees close to me. At this point, I didn't think too much about it, but that would change after a little while. I stopped at a point that looked really nice to set up my camera on a tripod in, and attempt to maybe snap some cool photos of the surrounding area and treetops. I sat down and continued to hear the knocking on a tree just a few meters behind me, and at this point, I started to feel a little bit weird since I hadn't really noticed how it seemed to follow me like that. A few seconds later, while changing my camera settings, I suddenly heard several very loud, clear, and heavy footsteps behind me that rapidly came closer and closer until it was right behind me, and my whole body instantly froze up. I have not till this day experienced chills like that through my entire body. After what felt like maybe several seconds, I flew up and turned to what I thought was some kind of a big animal, but when I did, there was nothing there. For context too, besides a few trees, this area was not really that dense. Just a few trees here and there, but mostly moss and grass really, which means that I should have seen it. In any case, I picked up all of my things and I started walking really quickly back towards my car, and that's when the knocking started again. It followed me again all the way, and I just knew that something was mocking me. So I said out loud, "Yes, I'm leaving." I thought to myself that whatever it was, it didn't want me there. I continued to hear the knocking until I came back to the spot where I first started hearing it, and then it just stopped. I didn't though. I went straight back to my car and I immediately went home. Now, before this, I was skeptical about the paranormal, but it really changed my views. Since then, I've only ever had one more experience, but this one definitely really scared me. So about 2 years ago, I, a 16-year-old female, at the time 14 though, was home with my mum. It was just the two of us. My mum at the time was addicted to drugs and alcohol and was in a essentially drug-induced coma, so nothing would wake her up. I decided to take a bath while she slept. My bathroom door was locked, as was my mother's bedroom door, as she seemed to think that we didn't know about her addictions and kept it all locked so that we didn't find out. And so the house was completely silent. I had only been in the bath for maybe about half an hour before I heard my front door open. I assumed it was my older sister coming home back from work, as nobody else would just walk in like that. But I wanted to be sure, so I texted her. But immediately, I got very worried when she texted me back saying that, no, she wasn't home. Why? Was somebody there? I froze. I could definitely hear footsteps now too. Our house was small, one story, and from the front door to the bathroom door was only like a small living room, and I heard a scraping noise coming up the hallway to the bathroom. I heard the scraping stop outside of the bathroom door, and then someone grabbed the doorknob and kept turning it very slowly side to side for about a minute. The entire time I sat there silent, frozen still and shaking like a leaf. I wanted to call my mum and ask if it was her, but I didn't want whoever it was to hear the sound and get to my mum. After a while, I didn't hear anything. I stayed in the bathroom for what I think was about an hour, until I heard the front door open and click shut softly. I still stayed in the bathroom in the bath long after the water had gone cold, until I heard my sister come in and yell if I was here and if I was okay, and asked why the door was unlocked. I got out of the bath and heard her gasp before I had come out, but when I did, my blood instantly went cold. There was a line spanning the wall of the hallway where the paint had been cut off, like someone had trailed something sharp along the wall. Currently, the theory is that the scraping noise that I heard was someone trailing a knife on that wall just outside of that bathroom. So I was on the way home from Arby's with a mint chocolate shake, zoned out for a sec, and almost actually didn't notice his car. I tried just letting him through, but he insisted that I go on ahead. Again, I didn't think much of it and just continued on walking. He drove on ahead and parked his car near some apartments. He had on a black polo shirt, so I assumed that he was just dropping something off for a job or something. As I kept walking, he approached me and offered me a $20 bill. I asked why, but couldn't understand what he said in his response. I refused since I know what's best for me. However, that didn't deter him. He grabbed my waist and I stepped to the side. He then started pulling me towards his car. I bit his hand so that he couldn't silence me and made sure to scream as loud as possible to try and attract any bystanders if I could. Unfortunately, he managed to get me into his car, and just before he could close it, I stuck my foot through the door to keep it open. I then got out and made myself go limp since it added dead weight, and without warning it creates sudden resistance and makes it harder for them to grasp you. Due to this quick thinking too, I was able to get away unharmed. I quickly booked it and I got on the phone with my mum once I was at a safe distance. I made sure to stay on the phone until I got back as well, but after that, I'd taken some time to calm down and waited for the cops to get there to get my statement. The officer ended up praising my quick thinking, telling me that I'd luckily done everything right in this situation. But please guys, do take self-defense seriously. I've only ever had a week-long course, and just that alone had managed to save my life that day, I think. I didn't remember too much from my self-defense course and only used the basic techniques that I remembered, which was making noise, dropping my weight, and checking behind me. Any other actions I'd taken were a result of logic and quick thinking. Chances are, though, that if I had gotten more self-defense training, it likely wouldn't have been as close of a call as it was. Also, never accept money from strangers. While there are good Samaritans out there, there's also a lot of people who don't have your best interests in mind. If you do think that they have good intentions, make sure to double check by asking what they're offering you money for. If you don't get a good legitimate reason, like I did, then make sure you refuse. If you refuse and they still persist, then take my advice and get out of there immediately. In 2017, I was an undergrad living with 3 other students in a rough student house in a big city. For context on the layout of the house, this will be beneficial for the story too. My bedroom was the only one on the ground floor beside the front door and opposite the kitchen. We only had a front door and front windows, no back door. My bed was in the middle of the room. The bottom of the bed was facing the bedroom door. There were 3 floors in total, 2 bedrooms on the second floor and another bedroom and sitting room on the third floor. And one June evening, we all decided to head out, with a few other friends who came around for pre-drinks, for a big drunken night out in the town to simultaneously celebrate end of exams, my 21st birthday, and one last big hurrah before everyone went back home or went traveling for the summer. Now, I'm not a huge clubber by any means, so me and my then boyfriend were ready to go home at around 1 or 1:30 in the morning. We hitched an Uber back, drunkenly got a takeaway, and passed out in bed at around 2:30. At 4:30, we were both jolted awake, though, by one of my housemates slamming open the door with, "We've been robbed." We rubbed our eyes in bewilderment as neither of us had woken up and thought that she was playing some sort of horrible prank. I mean, surely given our proximity to the front door, we would have heard something. We walked up the stairs to discover the upstairs rooms were largely ransacked and items were missing. Everyone's electricals that weren't on them were gone. Like laptops, iPads, cameras, passports were gone too, and my housemate's weed stash was taken as well. A baseball cap from the girl whose room was on the 3rd floor was found in another person's bedroom on the 2nd floor, meaning that the intruder wore the cap and took it off as he or they proceeded through the house. It then hit me though, what about my room? I raced downstairs to check my belongings and discovered that my handbag at the bottom of the bed was missing, and my ex's phone and wallet that were also at the bottom of the bed were also taken. My laptop was on the bedside table beside me and was untouched. But that means that the intruder or intruders managed to break open the front door, go through the entire house, ransack rooms looking for things to steal, and actually open the door of the bedroom that we were sleeping in to take things right in front of the bed that we were in. And we never woke up to any of it. To say that I was shook when I found out what had happened was an absolute understatement. The police came to take our statements eventually and file a report, but nothing ever came of it. To this day, I'm still super uneasy to go to bed in an empty house after that night. I'm forever thankful that we never actually woke up in the middle of the robbery, or that I went home alone that night, because the outcome could have been very different. I've been asked many times now in responses and conversations all over the place to share my experiences as an Order of St. John chaplain and demonologist. It's hard to know where to start, to be honest, but the most important thing that I think is to say that these are my beliefs and experiences. I certainly don't begrudge you yours, and definitely don't want to assert any kind of authority over the beliefs of others. As chaplains, we are not positioned within a church because we minister to communities. It really isn't our place to judge any member of that community, but only to care for and support them in their needs. Also, rule number 1 of the job is to disprove, and disprove again. Other than that, to save you the trouble, I'll share things in order of how much interest that I think that they get. I'll begin with experiences, then some insight into our processes, what I'm allowed to speak to anyway, how I got into the field, and then the training that I undertook. So, my experiences are this. General and passive paranormal experiences are part and parcel of the job. I'll touch on it more later, but I'm not afraid of things that go bump in the night. I used to be, but once you've studied and understand it, the paranormal loses its excitement and becomes more of a puzzle that needs to be solved. My passive experiences are things like every month or so I'll have some new knocking on our doors and windows, even though we live in a secure 3rd floor apartment. I get random prods and pokes when I'm by myself, whispering, murmuring, growling, scratching, electrical interference, random mists, distorted shadows and shadow figures here and there. This has all become weekly occurrence, although when I say that it's usually just one of these things that happens, I deal with it, and it goes away almost immediately. But this is probably my most fascinating one, because it's a reoccurring event that happens every couple of months, and I haven't yet solved the puzzle. You see, I travel a lot for my role, and at the moment I've been sent to one of our small towns to train people, run mental health programs, or help with large-scale crisis responses. This results in my driving for long hours, sometimes during the day and sometimes at night. And I will see the same stocky hitchhiking figure walking along the side of the road in a black hoodie and jeans, with hood up, thumb out. I've never stopped, mind you, and he's never turned around when I've approached. I've seen him at every point in the day, dawn, day, dusk, night. I've seen him in locations several hours drive from each location as well. At first, I honestly thought that it was just a coincidence, but hitchhiking is really uncommon in our country. We're small and buses are really cheap, so to see this guy like that in so many different locations, something is definitely up. The next one, this is another reoccurring one, although it's newer. It's more annoying than anything else, to be honest, but several times my partner and I have been woken to a long howl in our bedroom. Our windows are closed, apartment unit like I said, but it's ruining my sleep and I really enjoy my sleep, so this one is annoying. The next one, I'm actually thankful that it's resolved, but I had to deal with it over a series of years. To cut a long story short, whenever I was in the middle of a really tough case supporting someone in what we call spiritual warfare, I'd get a visit from whatever this was. It was the same every time, where I would have a dream of a cloaked figure, wake up to a spinning room, and I would be choking. I've had sleep paralysis episodes before, but this was definitely different. I'm still half convinced that this was some kind of sleep apnea issue or episode. The only thing that makes me think that it was paranormal is because it happened without fail when I dreamt of this figure, and it stopped after I put some intentional work into stopping it. There are also some experiences of clients that unfortunately I cannot share because I've made a strict confidentiality agreement with them, and that rests on my soul, but generally speaking, I've helped people deal with their psychological issues more than spiritual. Some spiritual ones have been fascinating, and there's a feeling that I get when there's a real obvious sign of oppression or infestation. It's sort of like a heavy feeling on my chest, and stuffy air, sort of. I've helped people by blessing their houses, which is a complicated process, and depending on your beliefs can be somewhat risky. You essentially have to call forth the oppressing force, challenge it, rebuke it, and either condemn it or suppress it, if it can't be dealt with in one blessing. I've also helped people with deliverance, although I'm not really big on the evangelical deliverance ministry. We're a more traditional denomination. But I've never helped with an exorcism. I'm still relatively young for my role, and while I am a commissioned member of the order, I'm not yet a fully fledged ordained minister or anything. So, now to our processes. We have to be careful with what we share, and that's for a really inane reason. We often get people who either want to play a prank or desperately want something paranormal to be happening, and the information that we don't share is essentially the key information that we need while triaging our cases. What I can say though is how we view the paranormal is unusual. Anything paranormal, by our theology, is demonological, angelic, or the Holy Spirit. When it comes to things that we humans get scared of, well, we're sort of hardwired to be scared of the paranormal if we believe in it. It's an non-interactable nocturnal threat, and it's really easy to trigger our limbic system. However, and again, just my view, I see paranormal activity as parlor tricks of a damned and jealous entity, but I have the power to send it back where it belongs, and it knows that, so it will struggle however it can. It will try and scare me because it is scared of me. And really it should be because I'm there to do a job. It's sort of like a spiritual pest extermination, I guess, but a moving cup, whispering, growling, etc., is nowhere as scary to me as, say, driving in heavy rain or the things that I've dealt with as a bouncer while I studied. Humans, dogs, even cats are more dangerous than most hauntings or paranormal experiences. One exception, though, is that possession is incredibly dangerous, but insanely rare too. I'm not scared of these things, not because I'm tougher or brave or anything, but because they're not really actually that dangerous, and they need to be condemned. That being said, if we go through an intensive investigatory sort of process, it looks a bit like this. So we're a medical order, we're also an indigenously focused arm of the order, and our perspective gives us a different worldview. When we assess a person, we don't just look at their spiritual health, we look at their social, physical, and psychological health as well. The first thing that we will do, fully funded, is have the person see a doctor and a psychologist for assessment. This isn't because we think that they're crazy, it's because we're building a comprehensive profile for exactly what we're dealing with. If someone is positive for physical or mental health issues that could be causing symptoms that they believe are spiritual, we need to treat those issues and see if the symptoms go away. Our church fully covers any costs associated with this process too. And if that doesn't solve the problem, my job is to definitively disprove the existence of paranormal activity or presences, but to do so while believing that there may still well be a presence. Skepticism is a good thing most of the time, but it's sometimes bad, I know that. We're not there to assume the issue is mundane. We take all the information that we can, assess it, and arrive at the likely outcomes. and we consider spiritual outcomes to be similar as likely as mundane ones. However, we still need to disprove all of the mundane theories that we can. But there's another layer to this, you see, because we also need to prove all of the mundane theories too. This helps us have equality of information, so we won't be happy to say, oh, it's probably just this mundane thing, unless we can prove that. After this, if there is persistence of a spiritual issue, we begin our church-sanctified process of blessings and protections for the affected individual. These interventions vary on intensity dependent on the person, their faith relationship, and the persistence of whatever that we're dealing with. I didn't take a standard pathway to this either. A standard pathway is that you attend a church that believes in demonological study, get as involved as possible with whatever you can, talk to the pastor about your desire to study and follow this pathway, and see if the church will support you. It's a long pathway though. You can also try to become a sort of lay chaplain for certain denominations, but honestly, the best thing that you can do is wholeheartedly commit to a church, show them that you're willing, and they'll support your journey. My pathway was that I studied a youth psych degree and specialized in youth gangs. Then a church was investing into the community and looking for a Christian with my expertise to be their youth pastor. I worked there for some time, and after a bit of a journey came back to my home denomination, and that's who I work for now. I got a master's in professional practice, chaplaincy, and a diploma in demonology. But my psychology knowledge is what sets me apart for this ministry in the eyes of the church. I'm much more equipped to do a referral assessment than many of the clergy or congregation. My training in demonology comes from several sources. I completed the diploma at Bible College, but have also done a small amount of training under a course from Bishop James Long. I did the Paranormal Academy of the United Kingdom online course because it's not Christian, and I trained under our Archbishop for some time to specifically respond to the needs of the community in this regard. As a chaplain, this calling fit under my purview in his eyes, and when I need to escalate church involvement, I go straight to him. He taught me our beliefs, blessings, the process of our church, etc. He also taught me our church's stance on demonology, which is really old school. We're Anglican. King James was a demonologist, so it's a particular field for us. And that's pretty much it. I'm always open to helping people on here, so if you have trouble, please just reach out through a message. I'm also happy to answer questions and engage in a discourse, although I'm not going to be entirely engaging in what-ifs from the stories. For me, it's almost impossible to prove the paranormal online due to the nature of evidence and how easily it can be faked, so I'm not going to get into that. And I've peer-reviewed these things with my colleagues, so to me, I'm satisfied. But before finishing, I would like to offer a couple of more stories. So after I started to get more involved in spiritual guidance and conflict and intervention, we started noticing more stuff happening around the house. One thing that came to visit was a large dark figure. They were about 8 foot tall. I'm 6'4", so tall in my own regard, but this thing was huge. It was coming from an underground storage next to our room. We were staying in a basement. After getting involved in a particularly nasty case, things started with knocking on the door from the underground storage area. Once a day at random times, we would hear a simple sort of knock 3 times. The area was a brick-walled room with dirt floors though, but there was no external access by either wind or people. We largely ignored it, and when the knock happened, if I was there, I would rebuke whatever was knocking by letting it know that it wasn't welcome. My partner, however, opened the door after the knocking but didn't tell me. She's not as spiritual as I am, and she was curious to figure out what the knocking was. The next day, we were relaxing in bed when the guitar standing next to the door strummed twice incredibly loudly. Again, I rebuked, but again, I didn't know that she'd answered the door. That night, I was struggling to fall asleep. I was tossing and turning, and was frustrated, so I opened my eyes to go to my phone. And when I did, roughly 20 feet away, I saw a huge black shadow figure standing in the corner looking at us. It was well built, with broad shoulders and a strong-looking body. I was frozen with shock at first, and then I flashed my phone screen in its direction. It didn't disappear immediately though, which shocked me to be honest, but sort of slowly dissipated from the bottom upwards. I prayed an incantation and I went back to sleep. The next night though was the same. I struggled to sleep and had a feeling, and when I was almost asleep I opened my eyes, and again, there was the figure, except this time it was standing next to the door to the underground area. I grabbed my blessed tire, it's a Maori weapon, and stood, then started to perform a fairly serious prayer. This half woke my partner up. This matters soon too, and as I prayed in the darkness, the same thing happened. The figure slowly disappeared. The next day my partner asked what I was doing, and I told her. I then asked her if she had seen anything, and she said that she'd been hearing the knocking and tried to find the source. I asked her if she'd opened the door after knocking, and she said yes. So I finally did what I should have, but was probably too scared to at the time in case I picked a fight that I couldn't win. I was new to all of this at the time, and blessed both our room and the storage room. I used frankincense and myrrh incense, holy water, and prayers in English, Latin, and my native Maori language. I placed an iron cross above the door on the inside of the house, and placed bigger wooden crosses above all of the entry points to my room, including that one. And, thankfully, I've had no problems since, and have gained a heck of a lot more confidence due to a lot more exposure. To this day, though, I'm not 100% sure what I was dealing with at that point. So, to be honest, I would really like to hear if anybody else has had experiences like this, to try and gain some more information and perspective on perhaps what it could have been. So I shared something about some howling at night and early morning too not too long ago, and also said that I'd been thinking about skinwalkers, and I'd also been reading about them lately. Well, tonight, I was outside with my cousin helping him set up his new basketball hoop. We got finished with it and he was shooting some hoops while I was watching, and it's about dusk at this point. Then he asks me if I want to go inside, and I say sure, and then all of a sudden I hear, "Help me, please help me, someone help." It sounded like a little girl crying for help near our pond. I was a bit shaken by that, and my cousin had already went inside the door but was waiting for me. At this point, I'm shaking because it's almost like I knew what it was as soon as I heard it. My cousin came back out and I no longer heard it. Then I'm shaking my way back inside to tell my fiancée, and she looks out the bathroom window because it's looking out towards the pond, and she sees a little girl out there. Then she tells me to come look. Not even 10 seconds later, and not even 10 seconds later when I get there, there's nothing there. What the heck is happening though? First it was knocking and howling, but we're having actual experiences now, and I'm seriously starting to worry. Obviously I checked for any sign of an actual little girl, and there was no sign of anyone out there. It wasn't a real little girl, of that I'm sure, and I know that it wasn't. I know who lives around this area, in fact, and I know what happens around here. It's not just some distressed kid, I know that. But I've been reading up on skinwalkers and also thinking about them. I'm about 60% native and also just had a child. Lots of negative things are going on in the family right now. It's pretty chaotic and it's feeding off of these things, I think. Also, by the time that I got out there, there's no way that she would have fallen in the pond. And there was just no sign of anyone there anyway. There was no splashing in the water, no ripples, and also when I checked it this morning, there were no footprints or hair or shoes or clothes or anything either. It was muddy enough to see if someone had been there last night too. And I think I'm going to start to try and catch this stuff on camera to document it, because obviously something weird is going on. So I've told my friends and family this story, and they just look at me like I'm crazy. I also ended up telling my wife when we were moving out of the house that this happened in. I lived in Nevada with my wife in a newly constructed house that was 3 floors. The master bedroom was on the 3rd floor, and there was no door up to the master floor. It was just open. Sort of like a loft, but it was a full-sized area, not a converted attic or anything. This is pretty common in Nevada, so that they can squeeze as many thin, taller houses in a lot as possible. But anyway, one night, about a month into moving into the house, we're both asleep. I wake up in the middle of the night at around 2 or 4ish and see all the way at the other side of the room what I can only describe as like a little creature, all black, and I couldn't make out any features or eyes or anything, but whatever it was small. Maybe 2 feet tall, I would guess, and had 2 arms and legs like a person, but was sort of wider and didn't move like a person. It was unnaturally fast. It ran quickly to the edge of the bed, and then I could tell that it was looking right at me. I couldn't move, and I very consciously remember thinking, oh no, I do not have time for this. I remember it peered over the mattress and had a longer nose, but for some reason, it was not able or allowed to get on the bed or something. I watched it for about 10 seconds, then was like, okay, if it can't get up, then I'm just going to roll over. So I rolled over and nothing else happened that night. I know that ending is pretty anticlimactic, but that's what happened to me that night. I never saw anything in that house again except for that one night. I was definitely awake and I could move, so it wasn't sleep paralysis. I've had that once, and this was much worse and way more terrifying. And I guess I'm just wondering if there's a name for what I saw, or if anybody else has had anything similar happen to them and what it was. So this happened to me in my early teens. I'm 21 now, and my best friend growing up had this huge farmhouse in the middle of Virginia. It was really old and beautiful, but also had a very dark history. In the house, there's a tunnel that leads to an underground room of sorts that was used for slaves to hide in the 1800s. And I'm 90% sure that some actually died down there while in hiding. So you can imagine the history and the energy that fills this house. I always felt scared there too. I never felt alone and wouldn't go anywhere alone in the house, even just to grab something out of my room. The room that I was staying in, obviously. Even the family was scared to stay there with no company because of the intense apparitions and also experiences, which I can get into another day. The rooms, though, were massive, and the entire house was white with, honestly, a sort of creepy vintage decor. And there was even a cabinet of ventriloquist dolls upstairs. No, I'm not joking. They were a really old family, honestly, with lots of dark problems, but anyways, the second time that I visited that house, I was with my mum, my best friend at the time, and her mum. It was a girls' trip. One night, I woke up and was so thirsty, and the last thing that I wanted to do was go downstairs and get water. I mean, I was terrified like everyone else. I hated that house at night, but my mum was pretty much dead asleep, so I literally sprinted downstairs with my head only looking at the floor. I made my water in 5 seconds, and when I made it to the stairs, something compelled me to look at the giant glass doors that were in front of the stairs. I was horrified, but I don't know, I just felt like I needed to look at the window. What I saw, too, when I looked at the window will haunt me for the rest of my life, because I saw a man as real as anybody else that I'd ever seen before, standing there. It was pitch black outside with a huge bright moon. The man was all black like a silhouette, but because of the moon being so bright, I could clearly see his entire body. He was blacker than black, like he stood out so much that I 100% thought that he was a trespasser. He was wearing a top hat and was unhumanly tall, like well over 7 feet. My heart literally felt like it stopped beating, and for a moment I felt like I was in a trance of sorts. I was so unexpectedly horrified, but I couldn't look away. He was also moving a little bit, almost like breathing, I think. Then, about 10 seconds later, he was gone. disappearing into seemingly thin air. Well, I absolutely panicked and bolted upstairs after I snapped out of my trance, that is. I cried to my mum and was up all night, and I didn't get a wink of sleep after that. The next morning, I told my friend and her mum about the experience, and they were not shocked at all. As they had seen multiple full-body apparitions in the house themselves, they didn't seem to be fussed by it. I found out later too that the nanny that worked for them even refused to go into some rooms of the house after her own experiences. But after that, I never went back to that house ever again. So I recently started a security guard job for the graveyard shift. The building has 12 floors, roof access, and 2 parking garages for reference. No one but me and my partner are supposed to be in the building overnight. Also, you need a keycard to use the elevator or get in the doors to the stairwell. Anyway, the first night one of the motion-activated toilets went off when no one was near it. We had to do a bathroom patrol. It happened right when we opened the door on a vacant floor. A week ago, I was doing a patrol from the 12th floor mechanical room, and as I left the room into the stairwell, the rooftop door was being rattled and slightly banged on. I ran up there, but when I got there was nothing. I assumed that it must have been a bird or something. I started my way down, and then the 11th floor door started jiggling. I jogged my way down because it's my job and I had to go there anyway. I swiped my key and, again, there's no one. It was quiet after that, besides the toilets and the walkie-talkies going off when we were touching it. Last night I was doing bathroom patrol at 4 a.m, listening to my music in one ear, and I get to the 11th floor to start and I hear footsteps behind me. I pulled out the headphones while turning around, getting ready to tell them to get out and that they weren't allowed in here. But when I did, yet again there's no one. But right as those footsteps stopped, there were heavy footsteps on the floor above me, but then they stopped right above me when I figured out where they were coming from. After I got out of that floor and into the stairwell and shut the door, I heard it sound like it was trying to open, but it wasn't moving. But there isn't any wind inside the building, and nothing showed up on the security cameras. I have no idea what's going on in this place, but I might actually try to record tonight what's going on. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that or not, though, but I'll try and ask and see if I can post it here. Anyway, have you guys got any idea what I might be experiencing here? It's terrifying, to say the least, and I would really like some answers. So my family and I would spend the summer at our college by the lake in Quebec, Canada. My stay-at-home mum lived with us there, while Dad worked in town visiting during the weekends. I had 4 brothers and a sister, and I was the youngest of the family. And back in those days, I was an 11-year-old skinny kid, prone to be teased a lot about my size, which made me really self-conscious. We were also practicing Christians, and things like nudity were considered a sin. I was therefore prude and would not even be seen in my swimming trunks outside my own family. Now, one summer evening at the cottage, I went to bed in my jimmies with about half a ton of bedsheets on. While summer was still in force, the nights were sometimes chilly, and my mum insisted that we sleep with the window open. Built in the early 1900s, the cabin was in fact 2 cottages that my dad had sort of reunited to make one larger place for the family. My parents had their room in the larger squarish part, while us boys shared the older part that was basically a rectangle reminiscing of a mobile home. My older sister had a separate room as well. The beds were modest, I guess, but comfortable. However, that night, I remember waking up sort of half asleep, a few times as well, to change position because the mattress seemed really cold and hard for some reason. At one point, I felt the bed had become ridiculously hard, in fact, and woke me up for good. The place was pitch black, but I noticed that I couldn't see the nightlight that was always on. It was then that it suddenly struck me that I wasn't even in my room anymore. From what I could see and feel, I was laying down on my back, totally naked, outside on a big flat rock like I was some sort of offering to a god. I panicked. I was terrified because I was afraid of the dark. I had no recollection of why I was out there, and it was way too dark to see if anybody else was there watching me. So I froze stiff, completely paralyzed. I couldn't move a muscle, nor utter a word. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out but breath and a low, almost inaudible sound, which got me even more scared. I felt a bug walking on my flat stomach, circling my navel and going down. It was a moth, and I hated bugs because they creeped me out a lot at that time. I imagined that I could get into some orifice, my mouth, my nose, or something, yet I couldn't move to send it away. After a bit, my eyes got used to the darkness, and for the first time I was able to make out where I was, less than 100 feet or so from the cottage. I closed my eyes, concentrated in order to calm down, and when I opened them again, I was finally able to move. And the first thing I did was slap that moth to the next town. I quickly got up, scraping my butt on the rock and hurting my left foot on a jagged edge. I proceeded to walk towards the house. The pain in my foot and my overall numbness prevented me from running. Oddly enough, too, I could feel the cold dirt and the pebbles under my feet, but I had sort of no feeling of the temperature outside at all. It should have been really chilly as I'd been out there naked for a while and there was a light breeze, but I didn't feel it. Maybe the adrenaline was just pumping through my body or something. I don't know, but I reached the door and tried opening it, but it was locked. My mum always locked the door at night when my dad was away, and these turn-of-the-century wood doors had deadlocks engaged from the inside, which means that I had to go around, but the back door was also locked in the same fashion. Fortunately, the guillotine window was open, and it was about 2 feet up the deck. And was this where I came out from? I didn't know, but I knew for sure that I would get back in that way, and without noise I entered the room and carefully slipped back into my bed and buried my head under the pillow. I remember praying that nothing had followed me through that night, and I listened to the silence and eventually slowly faded to sleep. The next morning, as I was coming to, I immediately felt my nakedness under the sheets, and I also felt an itch. I had scratch marks on my butt cheek from the rock, so I thought it wasn't just a bad dream after all. I woke up later than my brothers and sister, and it was a good thing because they hadn't noticed that I was naked in bed, or I would never have heard the end of it. They would have teased me to oblivion if I'm being honest, but I looked around, even under the bed, but I couldn't find my jimmies anywhere. So I got into my jeans and grabbed a t-shirt to join them for breakfast. I didn't know what to make of what I'd just been through. I couldn't tell my siblings because I felt that they would have not believed me anyway. Besides, being raised a Christian, I felt like admitting that I was fully naked outside was somehow a sin that I should be ashamed of. Later that morning, though, my older brother was playing outside. We all heard his voice as he called my mum to come in and check something, and we ran to see what it was about, and he pointed high up. As I looked, I immediately recognized my pajamas, hooked to the highest branches of an old 70 feet tall tree. One part was dangling over our head, the other was stuck in branches facing the lake. Everyone looked back at me, asking what the heck, but I didn't have a clue. My mum asked around, but everybody denied having anything to do with it. And to this day, I'm still at a total loss to explain what the heck happened that night. When I was 8 or 9, I saw something really weird on Christmas Eve. This was many, many years ago now, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. At the time, I still believed in Santa Claus, and As a good amount of children do, I had the usual anxiety and excitement for Santa to leave Christmas presents by the tree. After I went to bed, I had some trouble going to sleep with holiday nerves and such. I had finally drifted off at some point when I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps somewhere in my room. I automatically assumed that it was Santa Claus, and I was scared to see him for fear that he might leave or his magic will fail. I opened up one eye just barely, and when I did, I saw this black figure standing over my bed, staring at me. It was tall, probably around 6 feet, and it was completely black. It looked almost blacker than black in a way, if that makes sense, and I couldn't see any eyes, or mouth, or nose on it, but I could clearly see the outline of a head, arms, body, and legs. It looked like a bigger person, so thinking that it was Santa just made sense to me at that time. It stayed in one spot for maybe 10-15 seconds, until it took a few steps closer. It sort of leaned a little more and still a few feet away from me, and then stayed there for 10 to 15 seconds more. Even though I couldn't see a face, though, I knew that it was looking right at me. It's just that weird feeling you get when you know that you're being watched or looked at. I closed my eyes again and waited for a few minutes, and when I looked back, it was gone. I lived in a pretty old house at that time, so the doors and the floorboards were squeaky and loud. I heard the footsteps, but I never heard the door open, which was really weird. I never did see this figure again, though I've had some other spooky experiences in this house. I asked my mum, though, if she heard Santa when he came into my room last night, and she sort of looked confused for a second. Then she played along and just assumed that I was lying. I know this wasn't a person, and I know that it wasn't a dream. I also know that spirits or entities are often attracted to lots of excitement or energy, so Christmas might be a perfect time for a ghost to pass through. I don't know, but it's definitely a memory that will stick with me for as long as I live. So let me say first and foremost that I'm a man of logic and explanation. I've never believed in ghosts or other cryptic beings really in all my life, but something happened to me the other night that really made me feel weird. So I live somewhere in between country and town here in Florida and see an abundance of wildlife. Foxes, coyotes, raccoons, all very normal to see. Since there being a large fox population around here too, and most people having chickens and whatnot, everyone has large dogs, including me. I have a 70-pound boy and a 60-pound girl pit bull. They're pretty much fearless too. They know this is their property and they protect it as such, alerting me if they hear something. And if they do, I open the door and they run out to chase off whatever it is. Now, the other night, I woke up randomly and it was disturbingly quiet outside, like not even a single cricket. And my dogs were not by my bed like they usually are, and all of a sudden a howl like I'd never heard went off like a siren that sent a chill down my spine, like a deep yell almost, but definitely from an animal. I turned the lights on in my house to see my pit bulls at the back of their dog crate shaking. I've never seen a look on my dog's face like that before, purely terrified, so I turned all the lights back off, grabbed a flashlight, and looked out my back window. And what I saw, about 200 yards off a tree line near the back of my property, was what I can only describe as a dog thing. I vaguely saw it, but it was very similar to a hyena build with a large amount of fur on its neck, like a mane almost, and skinny back legs. Its head looked very wolf-like, with erect ears and a large skull, and it was absolutely massive. It was so black that it was hard to make out distinct characteristics, but its presence scared basically any living thing that was around it seemed anyway, that night. The next morning I went to the spot that I saw the animal, but saw no tracks or hair or anything. But I know what I saw, and I've never seen anything like that before. Has anyone in Florida seen anything like this? We've been having a lot of dead dogs in the area, dogs that are large and are being killed by something. Other people think it's the coyotes or a feral dog, but I have to wonder if it's the thing that I saw. Just seeing my dog so terrified too, that really scares me. So, I just want to go ahead and apologize up front that this has a lot of build-up. Lots of things led up to what I saw last night, but I feel the need to explain it. So first, I need to give a little bit of context. I'm a painting major at a very old college. It was even a Confederate hospital in the Civil War. Every building has its own ghost story and lore. Other students seem to have fun, spooky bonfire ghost stories, but no, not the art building. We just have some genuinely scary stuff, I guess. We've dealt with things flying off the shelf, voices, whistling, knocking, footsteps, phantom elevator riders. But last night was my most intense experience by far. The building is open 24/7 and my painting final is due today, so obviously I was up there late last night. The painting final was the last on the roster for the building, so most people had cleared out, drove home, semester over. So I was up there alone for quite a while. I was painting silently when I heard two very distinct loud knocks. There's two problems with this. One, nobody came in, and two, I heard it directly in front of me, not behind me, meaning that it came from the window and not the door. But I'm on the 3rd floor. I just kind of froze and waited to see if I could hear any kind of footsteps or sign of human life or something. But it was silent. I went back to the painting, and then about 5 or 10 minutes later, the door opened behind me, and my friend came in behind me, and we both jumped pretty hard, which isn't like him. He apologized for his squirreliness and worked on his painting silently. He's not a squirrely or quiet guy. He is normally a loud, flamboyant, raunchy character, 24/7 too, who famously does not really get scared by much. I mean, every time the air conditioner would rattle or the wall would creak, we would both snap our heads up and confirm, was that the AC? And yeah. Something about the energy was just so anxiety-inducing that night. I fixed myself a cup of tea to calm my nerves, but the anxiety just formed a migraine. Another 5 minutes later, my boyfriend came in. He also looked a little worse for wear. He turned to my friend Jamie and said, "Who were you talking to in the illustration room?" Jamie tried to correct him. "I wasn't talking to anyone. I thought that I heard someone in there, but I was wrong." We all perked up a little bit as Justin said, "But I saw you in there, talking to a man. You two were by the window." Jamie said, "I heard someone talking in there, but when I looked in there, it was empty. I was standing by the window to see if the sound was from the sidewalk, was traveling in or something, but there was no one outside or in the room." We sort of sat in silence for a minute. I'm the only one in the group who believes in the supernatural. They don't. They vehemently hate ghost believers. I don't think anyone wanted to admit what they were thinking, but after a moment, Justin said, "And someone was knocking on the printmaking door earlier too." I hadn't told him about the knocking. I didn't even want to talk about it at that point, to be honest, but me and Justin were supposed to hang out that night. He left early due to a migraine. We both had migraines from the stress, I think. I stayed up there, though, with Jamie for another half an hour, still anxiety-ridden the whole time, absolutely shaking in my boots. I just couldn't get myself to calm down. I decided to go for a walk just to get myself out of the room for a bit, but that was a really bad idea. So as I was walking down the hall, I suddenly felt an intense, crushing, instinctual fear. The "I'm in the woods and a cougar is after me" fear. I couldn't see or hear anything. In fact, it was just so silent I could hear a pin drop. But I felt like I was being hunted. It's hard to explain, but I went from a little stress to I'm about to die in like half a second. It was horrific, and I stood there for so long just sweating it out. I felt a little smidge of bravery eventually and stomped my feet. I don't know why, I just wanted to give it a hey, to heck with you sort of thing to bring my courage up. I'm a strange person, I know that, but that will become absolutely obvious when you hear this next bit. So I started speed walking to the drawing room, and in the drawing room we have a real human child skeleton named Derek, and sometimes I go in there to talk to Derek. I know, it's weird. I'm not a perfect person, I know that, but let me talk to my toddler skeleton in peace, okay? Anyway, I got in there and turned on one of the spotlights, which is just enough light for me to get around, and headed back to Derek. I vented my grievances to him, and after a pause I said, I'm sorry, and was cut off by a loud bang behind me. I did not stay to see what it was, did not turn around, and honestly, it sounded like one of those spotlights jamming into the concrete floors. I ran out of there as soon as I got my body past the threshold of the door, and I poked my upper body back in to slam the light switch back off. That was when I saw it. Illuminated by just the edge of the spotlight was a figure, just a little too tall, about 7 to 8 feet. He was in the corner that would have been behind me while I was sitting down, and as the light turned off, I could still see his faint outline. It was like what many people describe as a shadow man, but man, he was looking at me and I was terrified. I sprinted back to the painting room, grabbed my keys, and got the heck out of there. I left my jacket, my backpack, my MacBook. I mean, who cares, right? I just wanted out at that point. And it's been so long since I felt fear like that. I haven't told anyone what happened. I really don't want to. I felt sick sharing this, in fact. I want to get this exam over and done with, and then just not ever think about that building until, well, January, when I have to go back. When I first bought my home last year, there was a family of around 13 people living in it, 6 of which were adults, 3 small bedrooms and 1 sketchy annex in the garage. A year later, and the neighborhood is still telling me stories about how awful these people were as neighbors. The annex room was initially shoddy framing and drywall work, presumably installed by that family. The walls were painted a weird sort of green color, and the rug was a wrinkly stained mess. It became apparent that someone had been peeing in all 4 corners of the room too. I figured it might just be pets, but there was a mirror that had "Please help me" written on it in makeup, and the room was actually locked from the outside. The day that we got our keys, I got called to respond to the Seattle riots with my National Guard unit, and was gone for about a month. During that time, my wife and the in-laws began renovating the home to make it livable. I felt guilty being unable to help, but it was what it was. My wife got together with my mum to convert that scary extra room into a man cave sort of jam room with all of my musical equipment and memorabilia. It came out really nice, but I haven't found much time to use it in the past year. A couple of months ago, I built a gaming PC and decided to set it up in that room. And now that I've been going in there almost daily, things have started to feel a little strange around the house. You see, I get this sensation someone is standing directly behind me once or twice a day in that room. Our TV was set on fire in the living room a few weeks ago. Our water main burst last weekend, causing us to dig our yard up over the course of 3 days. And my garage light keeps turning on and off. I can hear the light switch. It's not an auto one. This morning, I got up out of the shower to find out that my wife already left for work. I'm coming down the hall and I swear that I hear her clearly say, "Hey babe," from the spare room side of the house. I replied, "You're still here?" To which I got complete silence. I looked out the front window and sure enough, her truck was gone. That's when I heard it again though, "Babe, come here." At that, I grabbed my things and I just noped to work. When I was pulling up out of the driveway, I could hear what sounded like a girl screaming from outside, followed by a bang. I stopped before backing into the street thinking, was that my phone? I waited for a second before continuing on my way, thinking that it might be the school across the street. I got about 50 feet down the road before I heard it again. This time it was faint, but sounded like it was coming from in the car with me. I paused at the stop sign and rolled down the windows to see if it would happen again, as it had sounded identical to the first one, but nothing. I rolled up my windows and continued on my way to find that it happened several more times, almost like a recording. Same scream, bang, over and over for another mile or so. Anyway, I'm weirded out for the day, and I don't know, I've never really done it before, but I might sage later and bang some pans together or something. I don't know. What do you guys think that I should do? So, it was a humid night in July when me and my 3 buddies were camping in a small quiet spot by a river. That night, alcohol and weed were flowing. It was around 12 a.m., maybe 1 a.m., when we were all just sort of cracking jokes and having a good time sitting around the fire, when one of my friends went quiet and had a weird look on his face. So I asked him what was up, thinking that he's not feeling alright or just needs to lay down, but he responded saying that he feels like somebody is watching us. So I told him that everything was going to be okay and just to relax, and if he wants he can sleep in the truck. Well, later that night we all went into our tents and I instantly passed out, but I was woken up by my friend that I was sharing the tent with. He was sitting up with his pocket knife out and open, so I asked him what was going on, and he replied with, "Just listen," which I did, and heard leaves crunching and branches breaking, and listening for a bit longer, it sounded like someone with boots was walking around outside. I got concerned because none of my friends brought or were wearing any boots, but after laying there for a while, the footsteps stopped right next to the tent and we saw a figure standing there. As we sat there trying to figure out what we should do, our best idea was to jump out of the tent and ambush the person. It sounded like a good idea at the time. So me and my buddy jumped out of the tent and were faced with a 6'5", 280-pound man, I would guess, with an unkempt beard and hair, and after standing in front of the man for a second, my friend just took off, running towards the truck, and me trying to follow. I crashed into the tent where my other 2 friends were sleeping. As I was laying on the ground in fear, I saw that the man was actually holding a machete, so I yelled, "Get the gun." We didn't actually have a gun, it was just a bluff. But well, my bluff worked, and the man dropped his machete and took off into the woods. We didn't hesitate, and we instantly picked up and got to the truck, and after going back to the house to calm down and get some more sleep, the next morning, we all went back to the spot fully armed, ready for anything. Once we got to the spot, we found the machete, and after following the tracks for a bit, we also found a small axe. And after seeing all of that, we all agreed to never go back to that spot or talk about what happened. So, this encounter happened this afternoon. I'm still very shaken about all of this and cannot get it out of my mind, so bear with me. My day started as it normally does. Early morning work shift, come home, drive my partner to work, come home to nap. However, when I got home, my partner texted me saying to pick them back up because apparently they just got news that they were laid off for the winter due to a very slow season. I went back, came back and went for my nap while my partner went to play video games. I was in a pretty deep sleep with my favorite TV show playing as background that I've seen a million times. About 2 hours or so later, I'm woken up to my creaky front door being opened, followed by a deep and unfamiliar hello. I listened intently as I thought that it could be my partner's friend who often stops by. I didn't hear anything further, so I shrugged it off to my TV and tried to go back to sleep. But shortly after that, I hear my partner open their bedroom door, I hear them yell, "Who the heck are you and why are you in my house?" I panic as I don't know who they're talking to, but I listen to the short interaction. And an older man, very startled by my partner's presence, explains that he had watched a package be delivered, and after no one came to get the package right away, he decided to come inside. The package was still on the porch afterward, by the way. My partner tells this stranger, who had been walking directly towards my bedroom, to leave and that they were calling the police. But the man sort of lingers, stalling my partner, and asks if he can use our bathroom. He says, "No, get out," and the man slowly makes his way out and drives away. We called the police immediately after he left, giving him his and his vehicle's description. I called my neighbor to let them know and keep an eye out, and he informed me that when he came home 2 to 3 hours earlier, that vehicle was parked at the end of our street, and when he drove by, the man actually covered his face. I can't stop thinking that this man knows my schedule and has targeted me for some reason. But I'm so lucky that today of all days, I was not home alone. When I was little, maybe around 4 years old, I lived in Okinawa, Japan with my Japanese mother and my American father, who at that time was stationed at one of the military bases on the island. We lived off base in a house and things were pretty great. But before I get to the story, let me give you a little bit of background information about my family. So, before I was born, my mother was dealing with the Yakuza for some time and she ended up owing them money for some reason. She managed to get out of that situation without paying them when she got with my Marine father, and the Yakuza would never hurt an American. So my mother knew that she was safe as long as she was with him and on the military base. Now, I have no idea why we lived off base at that time when I was born, but we did. And one evening, I was in my room upstairs playing when my mother comes in, frantically shutting the door behind her, locking it and turning off the lights. She tells me to be quiet, and when I ask her what the matter was, she just scoots next to me and I can silently hear her crying. My father was at work, I believe, at the time of the incident was happening. My mother and I heard the front door slam, and then we heard footsteps walking up the stairs. We see the silhouette of the person walking the hallway from the light peeking from underneath my bedroom door. My mother, who is panicking like crazy now and praying in her mother tongue, gets a hanger to use as a weapon. At this point, I am crying like crazy too. The doorknob starts to jiggle and it goes on for some time until all of a sudden it just stops. We believe that they're gone, but we didn't dare leave until the police came, and that's all I really remember from that time. As an adult now, 23, it took me years to put the story together. My mum still denies it like she does when I ask her about the certain parts of her past that she doesn't want to talk about. My dad doesn't even bother to answer the question and just disregards it. But I know what happened, even if it wasn't the Yakuza. Someone other than my father came into the house and they tried to get into my room. But thankfully, they didn't.